The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as pregnant Emma Wilson stood trembling before 500 wedding guests, her maid's uniform replaced by a spotlight that exposed every vulnerability. Vanessa Clark's cruel smile promised humiliation, but what happened next would shatter every expectation in that glittering ballroom. Some moments define us, and this was Emma's. If you're watching from New York, London, or anywhere between, stay with me, because this story of triumph will leave you breathless. Comment your city below. Let's see how far this tale travels. The Bennett mansion sprawled across 15 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside, its limestone facade gleaming in the early morning sun. Emma Wilson pressed her palm against her lower back, easing the persistent ache that had become her constant companion these past 6 months. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle reminder of the life growing within, even as she hefted the heavy bucket of soapy water up the grand staircase. "Watch where you're dripping." Vanessa Clark's sharp voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. The future Mrs. Bennett stood at the top of the stairs, her silk robe perfectly arranged, blonde hair cascading in waves that probably cost more than Emma made in a month. "These floors are Italian marble, not whatever trailer park linoleum you're used to." Emma bit back her response, focusing instead on the warm water seeping through her worn cleaning gloves. 3 more months. She just needed to hold on for 3 more months until the baby came, then she could figure out her next move. Nashville felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 8 months since she'd packed her dreams into a second-hand suitcase and headed north chasing survival instead of stardom. "I'm sorry, Miss Clark," Emma murmured, adjusting her grip on the mop handle. "I'll be more careful." Vanessa descended the stairs, slowly, deliberately, her manicured nails trailing along the banister. "You know, I still don't understand why Richard insists on keeping you around, especially in your condition." Her gaze dropped pointedly to Emma's belly, barely concealed beneath the loose-fitting uniform. "It's unseemly having someone like you waddling around during my wedding preparations." The words stung, but Emma had endured worse. She'd learned to build walls around her heart brick by brick, each insult adding another layer of protection. But sometimes, like now, when exhaustion made her defenses weak, the cruelty still found its mark. "Mr. Bennett has been very generous," Emma said quietly, wringing the mop with more force than necessary. "I'm grateful for the work." "Grateful," Vanessa repeated, tasting the word like wine she was about to spit out. "Yes, I suppose you would be. Tell me, does the father even know? Or was he just another musician who promised you the world from the back of a tour bus?" The mop handle creaked under Emma's grip. Jake's face flashed in her mind, his crooked smile, the way his fingers moved across guitar strings like magic. The promises that had seemed so real until the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and he showed his true colors. "I need to finish the morning cleaning," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The caterers arrive at 10 for the menu tasting." Vanessa laughed, a tinkling sound that held no warmth. "Oh yes, mustn't keep the help from their duties. Run along then." "But Emma—" She paused at the top of the stairs, looking down with predatory satisfaction. "Do try to stay out of sight during the actual wedding. I'd hate for the guests to think we run some sort of charity for wayward girls." Emma waited until Vanessa's footsteps faded down the hallway before allowing her shoulders to sag. She pressed one hand protectively over her belly, feeling the baby respond with a tiny kick. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "We're stronger than she knows." "That woman could make a saint consider murder," a warm voice said from behind her. Emma turned to find Antonio Diaz, the family's chef, standing in the doorway to the service corridor. His kind face was creased with concern, and he held a steaming mug in one hand. "Herbal tea," he said, pressing it into her hands before she could protest. "With honey. Good for the baby. Good for the mother's soul after dealing with that harpy." "Antonio, you shouldn't." "Shouldn't what? Treat you like a human being." He shook his head, his gray-streaked hair catching the light. "I've been with the Bennett family for 20 years, mija. I've seen 3 Mrs. Bennetts come and go, but never one as venomous as this one promises to be." Emma wrapped her fingers around the warm mug, inhaling the soothing scent of chamomile and mint. "She's not Mrs. Bennett yet." "No, but she will be in 3 days." Antonio's expression darkened. "And God help us all when she is. That woman has plans for this household, and none of them include keeping staff she considers beneath her station." "You mean me?" "I mean anyone who doesn't bow and scrape to her satisfaction." He glanced up the stairs where Vanessa had disappeared. "But yes, especially you. She's been pushing Richard to let you go since she found out about the pregnancy." Emma's stomach clenched. "But Mr. Bennett said—" "Richard is a good man, but he's blind when it comes to her. Love does that sometimes makes fools of even the wisest." Antonio patted her shoulder gently. "Just keep your head down, avoid her as much as possible, and we'll get through this wedding. After that," he shrugged, "after that, we'll see what God has planned." As if summoned by his name, Richard Bennett appeared at the top of the stairs. Even at 45, he cut an impressive figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair, in a way that only added to his distinguished appearance. His face softened when he saw Emma. "Good morning, Emma. How are you feeling today?" "I'm well, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for asking." He descended the stairs with easy grace, nothing like Vanessa's calculated performance. "Antonio, is everything prepared for the tasting?" "Of course, Mr. Bennett. The sample menu will be ready precisely at 10. "Excellent." Richard's gaze returned to Emma, noting the bucket and mop. "Emma, you shouldn't be handling such heavy equipment in your condition. Where's Marcus?" "He should be helping with the heavy lifting." "He's setting up the garden tent for the tasting, sir," Emma replied. "Really, I'm fine. The doctor says moderate exercise is good for the baby." Richard frowned. "Still, I want you to take it easier. In fact, why don't you take a break?" "Antonio, could you spare something from the kitchen? Emma needs to keep her strength up." "Already done, sir," Antonio said, gesturing to the tea in Emma's hands. "Good man." Richard checked his watch. "I have a conference call with Tokyo in 5 minutes, but Emma, please remember what I said. If you need anything at all, just ask." After he left, Antonio chuckled softly. "See, a good man. Just a fool in love." Emma sipped her tea, watching the morning light play across the marble floor she'd just cleaned. "Do you think she really loves him?" Antonio's silence was answer enough. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparation. Emma moved through her tasks mechanically, her body on autopilot, while her mind wandered. She found herself humming as she worked, an old habit from better days. Music had always been her escape, her companion, her dream. Even now, with that dream, shattered melody still lived in her bones. She was arranging flowers in the conservatory when she heard piano music drifting from the ballroom. Not the wedding march or any of the classical pieces Vanessa had insisted upon, but something sadder, more contemplative. Emma followed the sound, her feet moving, without conscious thought. Richard sat at the grand piano, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising skill. The melody was haunting, beautiful in its melancholy. He played with his eyes closed, lost in the music, and for a moment Emma glimpsed the man beneath the millionaire, someone who understood loss, who knew the weight of dreams deferred. The final note hung in the air like a question. Richard opened his eyes, and saw her standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry," Emma said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I heard the music and it's all right." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Do you play?" "A little. I mean, I used to. Back in Nashville, She stopped herself. That life was over. "Nashville," Richard repeated thoughtfully. "Music City. You went there to pursue music." Emma nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. "It seems foolish now." "Dreams are never foolish, Emma. Sometimes they just take different shapes than we expect." He gestured to the piano bench. "Would you like to play something?" "Oh, I couldn't." "Please. I'd like to hear it." Emma hesitated, then moved forward as if pulled by invisible strings. The piano bench was soft beneath her, the keys cool under her fingers. She hadn't touched a piano in months, but her hands remembered. They always remembered. She played one of her own compositions, something she'd written on a better day, when hope still felt possible. The melody started soft, tentative, then grew stronger, more confident. It was a song about rising, about finding light in darkness, about the strength that comes from being broken and choosing to rebuild. When the last note faded, she found Richard watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "Your own composition." "Yes, sir." "You have a gift, Emma, a real gift." Before she could respond, the sharp click of heels on marble announced Vanessa's arrival. She stood in the doorway, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Richard, darling, the caterers are here." Her voice was honey poured over broken glass. "And Emma, shouldn't you be cleaning something? The guest bathrooms won't scrub themselves." Emma rose quickly, too quickly, and had to grip the piano for balance as a wave of dizziness washed over her. Richard stood reaching out to steady her, but Vanessa's voice cracked like a whip. "She's fine, Richard. The help is used to being on their feet all day." Her smile was razor sharp. "Aren't you, Emma?" "Yes, Miss Clark." Emma left the ballroom with as much dignity as she could muster, but she could feel Vanessa's gaze burning into her back. She'd made a mistake letting her guard down, reminding Vanessa that she was more than just a maid. In her experience, that never ended well. The afternoon brought a parade of wedding vendors, florists with arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Caterers with sample menus featuring ingredients Emma couldn't even pronounce. The cake decorator whose 5-tier masterpiece would be adorned with real gold leaf and sugar flowers so realistic that butterflies might mistake them for the real thing. Emma tried to stay out of sight, but in a house preparing for a society wedding, there was always something that needed cleaning, arranging, or fetching. She was carrying a load of fresh linens to the guest wing when she heard Vanessa's voice from the study. "I want her gone, Richard." Emma froze in the hallway, her heart pounding. "We've discussed this, Vanessa. Emma needs this job, especially now." "Exactly my point. What kind of message does it send having an unwed pregnant maid serving at our wedding? What will the Vanderbilts think, the Astors? This is supposed to be the social event of the season, not some advertisement for a home for wayward girls." "You're being dramatic." "Am I? That girl is a walking reminder of poor choices and low morals. Is that really what you want associated with our special day?" There was a long pause. Emma held her breath, the linens growing heavy in her arms. "Emma is a hard worker who's fallen on hard times," Richard said finally. "Showing compassion isn't a weakness, Vanessa. It's what separates us from what the poor, the desperate." Vanessa's laugh was bitter. "Oh, Richard, your bleeding heart is admirable truly, but sometimes I think you forget who you are, who we are. There's a natural order to things, and that girl has no place in ours." She stays until after the wedding. After that, we can discuss it. Fine. But I want her out of sight during the ceremony and reception. She can work in the kitchen, or better yet, take the day off. Unpaid, of course. Emma didn't wait to hear Richard's response. She hurried away, the linens clutched to her chest like armor. 3 more days. She just had to survive 3 more days. That evening, after the vendors had gone and the house had settled into temporary quiet, Emma found herself in the kitchen with Antonio. He was preparing dinner, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of decades of experience. "You look troubled, mija." Emma sat heavily on a stool, her feet aching. "I overheard Miss Clark talking to Mr. Bennett. She wants me gone." Antonio's knife paused mid-chop. "That doesn't surprise me. The question is, what does Richard want? He defended me, but—" Emma shrugged. "She'll be his wife soon. Her word will carry more weight than his kindness. Perhaps, or perhaps not." Antonio resumed chopping, the rhythmic sound filling the silence. "I've seen Richard with 3 wives now. The first, God rest her soul, was his true love. Cancer took her too young. The second was a rebound, a mistake he corrected within 2 years. But this one—" He shook his head. "This one is different. She's calculating. She wanted Richard from the moment she set eyes on him at that charity gala last year." "You think she's marrying him for his money?" "I think she's marrying him for what he represents. Status, security, entry into a world she's always wanted to belong to." Antonio slid a plate of food in front of Emma. "Eat. You're too thin for someone carrying a child." Emma picked at the perfectly seasoned chicken, her appetite gone. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in Millbrook, never gone to Nashville at all." "You would have wondered what if for the rest of your life," Antonio said gently. "The only true failure is not trying at all. But look where trying got me. Pregnant, abandoned scrubbing toilets for women who see me as barely human." Antonio sat down across from her, his weathered face serious. "Let me tell you something, Emma. I came to this country with nothing but the clothes on my back and a dream of being a chef. I washed dishes for 5 years before anyone let me near a stove. I've been spit on, cursed at, told to go back where I came from more times than I can count. But I persisted. And now I cook for millionaires, and my daughter just graduated from medical school." Emma looked up surprised. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "Maria, my pride and joy. She's going to be a pediatric surgeon." His eyes shone with pride. "My point is, mija, that life rarely takes us on a straight path. Your music dreams aren't dead just because they're on pause. And that baby you're carrying, that's not a mistake or a burden. That's hope in its purest form." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Antonio. Now eat. That baby needs nutrients, not sadness." Later that night, Emma lay in her small room in the staff quarters, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was active tonight, rolling and kicking as if practicing for a soccer game. "I know, little one," she whispered in the darkness. "It's been a hard day for both of us. But we're going to make it through. We have to." She thought about the piano, about the way the music had flowed from her fingers like water from a spring. For those few minutes, she'd felt like herself again. Not the pregnant maid, not the failed musician, but Emma, complete and whole and filled with possibility. Vanessa could take a lot from her, but she couldn't take the music that lived in Emma's soul. She couldn't take the baby that grew stronger every day. And she couldn't take the small flame of hope that, despite everything, refused to be extinguished. The wedding was in 3 days. Emma would stay out of sight, as ordered, would endure whatever humiliation Vanessa had planned, would survive as she always had. But something deep inside her, something that had been dormant for months, was beginning to stir. The next morning brought chaos. The wedding singer, a Broadway veteran Vanessa had paid a fortune to secure, had come down with laryngitis. Emma heard Vanessa's shriek from 3 rooms away. "What do you mean she can't perform? The wedding is in 2 days?" Emma continued folding napkins in the dining room, each one requiring a precise crown fold that Vanessa had insisted upon. Through the open doorway, she could hear Richard trying to calm his frantic fiancée. "We'll find someone else. There are other singers." "Other singers." "Richard, do you have any idea how this looks? Miranda Caldwell has sung at the Met. She's performed for presidents. We can't just replace her with some lounge singer from the Holiday Inn. I'm sure we can find someone suitable." "Suitable?" Vanessa's voice rose another octave. "This wedding has been featured in 3 magazines. Town and Country is sending a photographer. We need exceptional, not suitable." Emma tried to focus on the napkins, but her hands had stilled. An idea was forming in the back of her mind, terrible and wonderful in equal measure. No, it was ridiculous. Vanessa would never... But the universe has a strange sense of humor. 2 hours later, Vanessa found Emma cleaning the music room. She stood in the doorway, her face a mask of calculated sweetness that immediately put Emma on edge. "Emma, dear," she said, the endearment sounding foreign on her lips. "I heard you playing piano yesterday. Richard mentioned you used to perform in Nashville." Emma's stomach dropped. "Yes, Miss Clark, but that was a long time ago." "Oh, don't be modest." Vanessa stepped into the room, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood. "Richard said you were quite talented. In fact, he couldn't stop talking about it at dinner last night." Warning bells were ringing in Emma's head. "I'm sure he was just being kind." "Perhaps. Or perhaps you really do have some talent hidden under that." She gestured vaguely at Emma's uniform and pregnant belly. "Situation." Emma said nothing, waiting for the trap to reveal itself. "You see, we've had a small crisis. Our wedding singer has fallen ill, and while I'm sure we could find a replacement, I had a thought." Vanessa's smile was sharp as a knife. "Why not give our staff a chance to shine? It would be so magnanimous of us, showing that we value all our employees regardless of their station." "You want me to sing at your wedding?" "Want is a strong word. But Richard seems to think you're capable, and I do so hate to disappoint him." Vanessa examined her manicure with studied casualness. "Of course, if you're not up to it, I completely understand. Pregnancy can be so limiting, and I'm sure your repertoire is more honky-tonk than high society." There it was, the challenge wrapped in an insult, the dare disguised as concern. Emma recognized the game. Vanessa expected her to decline to admit she wasn't good enough. Or worse, she expected Emma to accept and fail spectacularly, providing entertainment of a different sort for her society friends. "What would you want me to sing?" Vanessa's eyes lit up with malicious delight. "Oh, I have very specific requirements. Classical pieces, naturally. Perhaps some Puccini O mio babbino caro is traditional. And of course, Ave Maria for the processional. You do read music, don't you? Or was your Nashville experience limited to 3-chord country songs?" Emma's hands clenched at her sides. "I can read music." "Wonderful. The reception is another matter. We'll need at least a dozen songs, all appropriate for our guests' refined tastes. Jazz standards, perhaps some contemporary pieces, but nothing vulgar or common." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "I'll send you the list. You have 2 days to prepare. Think you can manage?" Pride warred with common sense in Emma's chest. She knew this was a trap, knew Vanessa was setting her up for humiliation. But the musician in her, the part that had once stood on stages and moved audiences to tears, refused to back down. "I can manage." Vanessa's smile widened. Perfect. Oh, and Emma, you'll need something appropriate to wear. We can't have you performing in that uniform. I'll have something sent to your room. Nothing fancy, of course we wouldn't want you to outshine the bride. She laughed at her own joke. The rehearsal is tomorrow at 4. Don't be late. After Vanessa left, Emma sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. What had she just agreed to? You know it's a trap. She looked up to find Antonio in the doorway, concern etched across his face. Of course it's a trap, Emma said. But what choice do I have if I refuse? She'll paint me as ungrateful, unwilling to help in a crisis. If I accept and fail, you won't fail. You haven't heard me sing, Antonio smiled. No, but I've heard you hum while you work. I've seen the way your whole body changes when music plays. You're the real thing, mija. And that terrifies her. Why would it terrify her? She's marrying a millionaire. She's beautiful, educated, connected. I'm nobody. Exactly. You're nobody, and yet you have something she'll never have: authentic talent, genuine soul. She can buy Broadway singers and orchestra seats and private concerts, but she can't buy what you have naturally. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, Emma. Vanessa Clark doesn't just want to embarrass you. She wants to destroy you. That evening, alone in her room, Emma stared at the list Vanessa had sent. It was deliberately impossible. Opera pieces that required years of training, jazz standards in difficult keys, contemporary songs with ranges that would challenge professional performers, and all to be learned in 48 hours. She could back out. Claim illness, claim the baby was making her too tired. But as she scrolled through the list, something rebellious stirred in her chest. Vanessa had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed Emma's Nashville dreams meant she was limited to country music. She had no idea about the years of classical training Emma's grandmother had insisted upon, the jazz clubs, where Emma had cut her teeth, the variety of styles she'd mastered in pursuit of her dreams. Emma pulled out her phone, opening YouTube to find recordings of the pieces. She'd show Vanessa Clark exactly what a nobody could do. The dress arrived the next morning, a shapeless black thing that looked more like a tent than a gown. It was deliberately unflattering, designed to make her pregnancy look graceless and her figure dumpy. Emma held it up against herself in the mirror and laughed. If Vanessa thought an ugly dress would break her spirit, she had another thing coming. She spent the morning practicing quietly in the staff quarters, humming melodies while she worked, running through scales in the shower. Her voice felt rusty from disuse, but it was still there, still strong. The baby seemed to enjoy it, settling calmly whenever she sang, as if already recognizing its mother's voice. At 4 o'clock, Emma made her way to the ballroom, where the rehearsal was being held. The space had been transformed into a floral wonderland, thousands of roses in shades of white and blush crystal everywhere, gold accents that caught the afternoon light. The wedding party was already assembled. Vanessa in a designer suit, her bridesmaids in coordinated pastels, Richard looking handsome but tired. Ah, there's our emergency singer, Vanessa announced, her voice carrying across the room. Everyone, you remember Emma, our maid. She's graciously agreed to fill in for Miranda. The bridesmaids tittered, exchanging knowing looks. One of them, a blonde with a nose job that hadn't quite settled right, stage whispered, "Isn't she the pregnant one?" Now, ladies," Vanessa said with false magnanimity. "We must be charitable. Emma, why don't you show us what you've prepared? Just Ave Maria for now. We wouldn't want to overtax you." Emma made her way to the front of the room, feeling every eye upon her. The string quartet Vanessa had hired looked skeptical. The wedding coordinator, a sharp-faced woman in severe black, was already pulling out her phone, probably to source a backup singer. Emma positioned herself by the microphone, closed her eyes, and drew in a breath. For a moment, she let herself remember what it felt like to own a stage, to command a room with nothing but her voice. Then she opened her mouth and sang. The first note filled the ballroom like liquid gold, pure, clear, impossibly beautiful. The chattering stopped. The bridesmaids' smirks faded. Even the string quartet sat up straighter. Emma sang Schubert's Ave Maria as it was meant to be sung with reverence, with power, with a depth of emotion that came from understanding loss and hope in equal measure. Her voice soared through the high notes, effortlessly settled into the lower register with rich warmth. She sang for her unborn child, for her broken dreams, for every moment of humiliation she'd endured. She sang because music was the only truth she'd ever known. When the last note faded, the ballroom was silent. Richard was staring at her with something like awe. The wedding coordinator had lowered her phone mouth slightly open. Even the jaded string quartet looked impressed. It was Vanessa who broke the spell, clapping slowly, deliberately. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "that was adequate, though perhaps a bit too theatrical for the actual ceremony. We want elegance, not American Idol." "I thought it was beautiful," Richard said quietly. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. "Of course you did, darling. You always did have a soft spot for strays." She turned back to Emma. "That will be all for today. Be here at 10 tomorrow for the final rehearsal. And do try to rest your voice. We wouldn't want you to crack during the actual performance." Emma nodded and made her way out of the ballroom, but not before she caught Richard watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. As she passed the bridesmaids, she heard one whisper, "Where did that come from?" Where indeed, Emma thought. From the ashes of who I used to be. That night she practiced until her voice was raw, running through the impossible list Vanessa had given her. She modified some pieces to suit her range, arranged others to highlight her strengths. If Vanessa wanted a performance, Emma would give her one she'd never forget. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Emma was up before sunrise, warming up her voice with gentle scales. Her back ached worse than usual, and the baby seemed restless, but she pushed through the discomfort. Today was about survival. Tomorrow she could rest. The house was a hurricane of activity. Florists making last-minute adjustments, caterers setting up stations, photographers testing their equipment. Emma tried to stay out of the way, but there was always something, a spilled tray that needed cleaning, linens that needed pressing, a bridesmaid who needed her dress steamed. She was heading to her room to change into the awful black dress when she overheard Vanessa talking to her maid of honor. "I still can't believe Richard insisted on keeping her," Vanessa was saying. "Can you imagine a pregnant maid singing at my wedding? It's like something out of a bad movie." "Why did you agree to it?" the friend asked. "Because, darling, sometimes you have to give them enough rope to hang themselves. When she fails, and she will fail, Richard will see that I was right all along. That girl doesn't belong here, and after tonight, he'll have no choice but to agree." "You really think she'll bomb?" "I've made sure of it. The song list I gave her is impossible. Professional singers would struggle with it. And the dress," Vanessa laughed, "she'll look like a pregnant circus tent. The guests will be horrified, Richard will be embarrassed, and I'll graciously forgive his lapse in judgment. It's perfect." Emma backed away silently, her hands shaking. She'd known it was a trap, but hearing it confirmed so coldly, so calculatedly, made her stomach turn. For a moment she considered running, packing her few belongings, and disappearing before the ceremony. But where would she go, and how would she support her baby? No. She would not run. She would not give Vanessa the satisfaction. In her room, Emma looked at herself in the mirror. The black dress was even worse than she'd remembered, shapeless, cheap fabric, utterly wrong for a society wedding. But as she stared at her reflection, an idea formed. 20 minutes later, she emerged transformed. She'd belted the dress with a silver ribbon from the gift-wrapping supplies, creating a Grecian-style drape that flattered rather than hid her pregnancy. She'd pinned her hair up in an elegant twist, borrowed some pearl earrings that a guest had left in the bathroom weeks ago and forgotten to claim. She wasn't beautiful, she'd never be beautiful in the way Vanessa was, but she had dignity. She had presence. Antonio whistled low when he saw her. "Mija, you look like a pregnant maid in a cheap dress, like a woman who knows her worth." He squeezed her shoulder. "Give them hell." The ceremony was held in the garden under a canopy of roses and fairy lights. 300 guests in designer clothes sat in white chairs fanning themselves with programs that probably cost more than Emma's weekly salary. She stood to the side with the string quartet trying to remain invisible until her moment came. The processional began. First the bridesmaids floating down the aisle like pastel clouds, then the moment Vanessa's entrance. She was stunning, there was no denying it. Her dress was a couture masterpiece, her veil cathedral length, her smile radiant. She looked like every little girl's dream of a princess bride. Emma sang the Ave Maria as Vanessa walked down the aisle. Her voice carried across the garden like a prayer, beautiful and haunting. She saw guests dabbing at their eyes, saw Richard's expression soften as he watched his bride approach. For a moment, Emma could almost believe in the fairy tale. The ceremony itself was a blur of vows and rings and kisses. Emma sang when cued, her voice never wavering, even as her feet ached and her back screamed in protest. During the Unity Candle ceremony, she performed the prayer. A last-minute addition Vanessa had thrown at her show that morning, probably hoping she wouldn't know it. But Emma did know it had sung it at a dozen Nashville weddings when she was trying to make ends meet. Finally, it was over. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Bennett were introduced to thunderous applause. They swept back down the aisle to Mendelssohn's Wedding March, and Emma allowed herself a moment to breathe. The ceremony was done. Now she just had to survive the reception. The ballroom had been transformed into even more of a wonderland for the evening celebration. Emma took her position near the band, grateful for the small stool someone had provided. The baby hadn't stopped moving all day, responding to the stress and the music in equal measure. The cocktail hour was easy enough of instrumental music from the band, while Emma rested her voice. She watched the guests mingle, champagne-flowing laughter, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. This was Vanessa's world, now a world of privilege and excess that Emma would never belong to. Then came dinner, and with it, Emma's first set. She began with jazz standards as requested, "The Way You Look Tonight." At last, "Fly Me to the Moon." Her voice was warm, honey-smooth, and rich, perfect for the intimate atmosphere of dining. She saw heads turning, saw conversations pause as people listened. "Who is that?" she heard someone ask. "She's wonderful." "I don't know," came the response. But Vanessa always does find the best entertainment. Emma might have smiled if she hadn't caught Vanessa's expression. The bride was not pleased. This wasn't the failure she'd orchestrated. As the evening progressed, Emma worked through the impossible list. Opera pieces that showcased her range. Pop songs that highlighted her versatility. Each performance was met with increasing enthusiasm from the guests. By the time she reached the dance sets, people were actually requesting songs, calling out favorites, treating her like the professional she'd once dreamed of being. It was during a break between sets that it happened. Vanessa approached the microphone, champagne glass in hand, smile bright as a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying across the room, "I have a special treat for you all. You've been enjoying our entertainment this evening, but what you don't know is that our singer isn't a professional at all. She's actually one of our household staff." A murmur ran through the crowd. Emma's blood turned to ice. "Yes." Vanessa continued, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Emma here is our maid. Isn't it wonderful how talented the help can be when our original singer canceled? Dear Emma volunteered to step in. Isn't that just so brave of her?" The way she said brave made it sound like pathetic. In fact, Vanessa went on, her smile widening, "I think we should give Emma a real chance to shine. Don't you all want to hear what a maid from Nashville can really do? Emma dear, why don't you sing us something from your own repertoire? Something authentic." The trap had sprung. This was the humiliation Vanessa had planned all along. Put Emma on the spot without preparation and watch her crumble. The guests were all watching now, some with curiosity, others with the kind of anticipation that comes before a car crash. Emma stood slowly, her hand protectively over her belly. She could feel every eye in the room on her, could sense Vanessa's triumph, could see Richard's confusion. This was her moment of truth. She walked to the microphone with as much dignity as her aching feet would allow. The band leader looked at her questioningly, but she shook her head. She wouldn't need accompaniment for this. "Miss Clark is right," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I am the maid. I clean your bathrooms, wash your sheets, scrub your floors. I'm also 6 months pregnant, abandoned by the man who promised to love me, and working 16-hour days to prepare for a baby I'll be raising alone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's smile faltered. "But before I was any of those things," Emma continued, "I was a songwriter, a singer, a woman with dreams as big as any of yours. And while those dreams might not have come true the way I planned, the music never left me. So yes, I'll sing you something authentic, something real, something mine." She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, and began to sing. The song that poured from Emma's soul wasn't on any list Vanessa had given her. It was something she'd written during those long, sleepless nights when the baby kicked and turned, when the weight of her choices pressed down like stones on her chest. She called it "Rise from the Ashes," and she'd never sung it for anyone before. Her voice started soft, almost a whisper, telling the story of a girl who'd reached for stars only to find herself falling. The melody was haunting, raw, stripped of any pretense or polish. As she sang, the ballroom seemed to shrink, the glittering chandeliers and towering flower arrangements fading into shadow. There was only Emma, her voice, and the truth she was laying bare. "I was 17 with a suitcase dream, Nashville lights calling out to me." She sang, her voice gaining strength. "Every door that closed, every no I heard just made me fight harder, made me test my worth." The guests had gone completely silent. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving trays balanced in frozen hands. Richard stood near the head table, his expression unreadable, while Vanessa's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. Emma's voice soared as she reached the chorus, filling every corner of the ballroom with pure, undeniable power. "From the ashes I rise with fire in my eyes. You can knock me down, but I'll stand my ground. This child I carry, this song I sing, are proof that broken doesn't mean I can't have wings." She sang about Jake, though she didn't name him, the musician with promises like smoke, who disappeared the moment responsibility knocked. She sang about scrubbing floors while morning sickness ravaged her body, about feeling the first flutter of life inside her, while cleaning toilets, about the dignity in survival, even when the world tried to strip it away. Antonio stood in the doorway to the kitchen, tears streaming down his weathered face. Several of the female guests were openly weeping, mascara be damned. Even some of the men had suspiciously bright eyes. The song was more than music, it was testimony, confession, and declaration all at once. As Emma reached the final verse, her voice dropped to an intimate whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. So judge me if you must for the choices that I've made. But know that every scar has made me who I am today. This baby won't grow up ashamed of where we've been. We'll rise from these ashes again and again. The last note hung in the air like a benediction. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then from somewhere in the back of the room, someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by another and another, until the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. People were standing, whistling, cheering, some still wiping tears from their eyes. Emma stood at the microphone, stunned by the response. She'd expected disgust, mockery, maybe polite discomfort at best. She hadn't expected this. "Bravo!" called out an elderly woman, dripping in diamonds. "Simply magnificent. Incredible!" someone else shouted. "Where has she been hiding?" Emma's eyes found Richard in the crowd. He was clapping slowly, deliberately, his gaze intense. But it was Vanessa's expression that truly caught her attention. The bride's perfect face had twisted into something ugly, something that reminded Emma of a wounded animal backed into a corner. "Well," Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the applause like a scythe through wheat. She'd grabbed the microphone from Emma's hands, her grip so tight her knuckles were white. "That was certainly unexpected. Such raw emotion. Though perhaps a bit inappropriate for a wedding celebration, don't you think?" The applause stuttered and died. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. After all, Vanessa continued, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "This is supposed to be a joyful occasion, not some sob story about poor life choices. But I suppose we can't expect everyone to understand proper decorum." "I thought it was beautiful," a clear voice said from the crowd. Emma turned to see a young woman, perhaps 25, standing near the dance floor. She recognized her from the society pages, Caroline Astor heiress, to a shipping fortune, and known for her rebellious streak. "Did you—" Vanessa's tone could have frozen champagne. "How progressive of you, Caroline." "It was more than beautiful," Caroline continued, undaunted. "It was authentic, real. When was the last time any of us heard something real at one of these events?" "Real." Vanessa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Real is a pregnant maid who got herself knocked up by some traveling musician. Real is someone who cleans our toilets thinking she deserves to share our stage. Real is knowing your place and staying in it." The words hung in the air like a slap. Several guests gasped. Richard stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "Vanessa, that's enough." "Enough!" She whirled on him, her wedding dress swirling around her like foam on a poisoned sea. "I haven't even started, darling. Did you know your little charity case here tried to seduce Marcus last month?" "Oh yes, Emma, I know all about that. Throwing yourself at the groundskeeper, hoping to trap another man with that baby of yours." Emma's world tilted. "That's not true. Marcus tried to. I pushed him away." "Of course you did." Vanessa's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Just like I'm sure that baby's father really abandoned you, and you didn't drive him away with your desperation and delusions of grandeur." The cruelty was breathtaking. Emma felt tears pricking her eyes, her hands shaking. The crowd was watching like spectators at a gladiator match, some horrified, others fascinated by the blood in the water. "You want to know what's real?" Vanessa continued, advancing on Emma like a predator. "Real is that you're nothing, a nobody. A cautionary tale that mothers tell their daughters about what happens when you reach above your station. You can sing all the pretty songs you want, but at the end of the day, you're still the help. And tomorrow, you'll be unemployed help. Stop! Richard's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of command. Vanessa, stop this now. Or what, Richard? You'll defend her, your precious little maid. Vanessa's laugh was wild, unhinged. God, you're so predictable. Always trying to save someone, aren't you? First, your pathetic brother with his gambling debts, then that charity case from your office, and now her. Tell me, were you planning to sleep with this one too, or is the pregnancy a turn-off? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face had gone white, then red, then settled into something cold and dangerous that Emma had never seen before. How dare you, he said quietly. How dare I? How dare I? Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. I'm your wife, Richard. We just said vows an hour ago and you're taking her side. There shouldn't be sides, Vanessa. This is our wedding. Exactly our wedding, which she's ruining with her white trash sob story and her bastard baby. The word hung in the air like a curse. Emma's hand went protectively to her belly, where the baby had gone suddenly still, as if even it could sense the violence in the atmosphere. It was Antonio who broke the tableau, stepping out from his position by the kitchen door. In his hand was his phone held high for everyone to see. I think, he said calmly, that everyone should hear this. He pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the ballroom, tinny but unmistakable through the phone's speakers. When she fails, and she will fail, Richard will see that I was right all along. That girl doesn't belong here, and after tonight he'll have no choice but to agree. Her friend's voice. You really think she'll bomb? I've made sure of it. The song list I gave her is impossible. Professional singers would struggle with it. And the dress, she'll look like a pregnant circus tent. The guests will be horrified, Richard will be embarrassed, and I'll graciously forgive his lapse in judgment. It's perfect. Antonio stopped the recording. The ballroom was so quiet, Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Vanessa's face had gone from pale to gray. You recorded me, you sneaky little... I recorded someone planning to humiliate a pregnant woman for sport, Antonio said evenly. I recorded cruelty masquerading as charity. I recorded the truth. Richard. Vanessa turned to her new husband, her voice suddenly small, pleading. It's not, I didn't mean... But Richard wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Emma, who stood frozen by the microphone, tears running silently down her cheeks. Is it true? He asked her quietly. About Marcus? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. He cornered me in the laundry room. Said pregnant women were easy. I pushed him away. Told him I'd scream if he touched me again. He said no one would believe the maid over the groundskeeper. He was right. You never reported it. To whom? Emma's laugh was bitter. Miss Clark made it clear from day one that I was expendable. Richard closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were full of something that looked like shame. Emma, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. This is ridiculous, Vanessa exploded. You're going to believe her. She's obviously lying, trying to get sympathy, trying to... Shut up. Richard's voice was flat dead. Just shut up, Vanessa. She recoiled as if he'd slapped her. You can't speak to me like that. I'm your wife. For about another hour, Richard said quietly. The guests gasped collectively. Vanessa's mouth fell open. What? You heard me. Richard pulled out his phone, already dialing. James, yes. I know what time it is. I need you to start annulment paperwork immediately. Yes, tonight. I don't care what it costs. You can't do this, Vanessa screamed. We're married. We just got married. A marriage built on cruelty and deception isn't a marriage at all. Richard's voice was tired, so tired. I was blind, Vanessa. Blinded by your beauty, your charm, your attention. But Emma just showed me what real beauty looks like. It looks like courage. It looks like dignity in the face of cruelty. It looks like truth. He turned to the stunned crowd. I apologize to all of you for this spectacle. Please enjoy the rest of the reception. The food and music are paid for. But there will be no bride and groom dance tonight. Vanessa stood in the middle of the dance floor, her perfect wedding dress suddenly making her look like a child playing dress-up. Her face cycled through emotions, rage, disbelief, humiliation, before settling on something vicious. You'll regret this, she hissed at Emma. You think you've won? You're nothing but a pregnant whore who… The slap came out of nowhere. Not from Richard, not from Antonio, but from Carolyn Astor, who had crossed the dance floor in 3 quick strides. That's enough, Caroline said coolly, shaking out her hand. You've embarrassed yourself sufficiently for one evening. I suggest you leave before security has to escort you out. Security won't touch me. I'm Mrs. Richard Bennett. No, Richard said quietly. You're not. You never really were. Vanessa looked around the ballroom, searching for allies, for anyone who would take her side. But the faces that looked back at her were cold, disgusted, or simply embarrassed. Even her bridesmaids had stepped back, distancing themselves from the train wreck. With a sound somewhere between a sob and a snarl, Vanessa gathered up her cathedral-length train and fled the ballroom. The click of her heels on marble faded into the distance, and then she was gone. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emma stood frozen by the microphone, her body shaking with adrenaline and delayed shock. The baby had started moving again, agitated kicks that made her wince. Emma. Richard started toward her, but she stepped back, her hand raised. I need to go, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry about your wedding, Mr. Bennett. I never meant… You have nothing to apologize for, Richard said firmly. Nothing at all. But Emma was already moving, walking as quickly as her swollen feet would allow toward the service exit. She heard voices calling after her. Richard, Antonio, even Carolyn Astor. But she couldn't stop. If she stopped, she would collapse, and she couldn't collapse here, not in front of all these people who'd witnessed her humiliation and her unexpected triumph. She made it to the staff quarters before her legs gave out. Sliding down the wall in the narrow hallway, Emma wrapped her arms around her belly and let the sobs come. They shook her entire body, great gasping things that felt like they were tearing her apart from the inside. Mija. Antonio's gentle voice came from above her. She hadn't heard him follow. Come on, let's get you somewhere more comfortable. He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they made their way to her small room. Once inside, Emma collapsed on the narrow bed, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion and emotional trauma of the day. I'll lose my job, she whispered. Even if Mr. Bennett doesn't blame me, I can't stay here. Not after this. You might be surprised, Antonio said, pulling the uncomfortable chair closer to her bed. Richard Bennett is a good man who just got reminded of what's important. It doesn't matter. I can't face those people again. They all saw… Her voice broke. They saw a woman with more courage than anyone in that room, Antonio said firmly. They saw truth triumph over lies. They saw something real in a world full of facades. A soft knock interrupted them. Antonio opened the door to find Richard standing in the hallway, still in his wedding tuxedo, but with the bow tie undone and hanging loose. May I come in? He asked quietly. Emma struggled to sit up, but Richard gestured for her to stay where she was. He took in the small room barely larger than a closet, with its single bed, tiny dresser, and one small window. His expression darkened. "This is where you've been living." "It's fine," Emma said quickly. "I'm grateful for—" "It's not fine." Richard cut her off. "None of this is fine. Antonio, could you give us a moment?" The chef looked at Emma, who nodded slightly. After he left, Richard sat in the abandoned chair, his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "More than one, actually. I knew Vanessa could be difficult, but I told myself it was just wedding stress, that she'd settle down after we were married. I was willfully blind to her cruelty." "You loved her," Emma said softly. Richard's laugh was bitter. "Did I, or did I love the idea of her, the beautiful, charming woman who seemed to adore me? I think I was so lonely after Margaret died that I would have fallen for anyone who paid me attention." Margaret. Emma had heard the staff mention the first Mrs. Bennet, occasionally, always with reverence and sadness. "But that's not your concern," Richard continued. "Emma, what happened tonight, your song, your bravery, it was extraordinary. You have a gift, a real powerful gift that shouldn't be hidden away cleaning houses. Gifts don't pay rent, Mr. Bennet. They don't buy formula or diapers." "No, but they should." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. "I've been making some calls while you were up here. A friend of mine, David Chen, owns one of the biggest recording labels in New York. He was at the wedding tonight. He wants to meet with you, Tell." Emma stared at him. "What?" "He was blown away by your performance. Said it was the most authentic thing he'd heard in years. He wants to offer you a contract." The room spun. Emma gripped the edges of the bed. That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's happening. If you want it." Richard leaned forward. "Emma, you don't have to clean houses anymore. You don't have to worry about supporting your baby alone. This is your chance." "But I'm pregnant. No label is going to—" David's daughter was a single mother at 19. He raised her child while she pursued her career. He understands, and he doesn't care. All he cares about is your voice and your story." Emma's mind raced. It was too much, too fast. This morning she'd been a pregnant maid preparing to be humiliated. Now she was being offered a recording contract. "I need time to think," she managed. "Of course. David will wait for your answer." Richard stood, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Emma, I think you should take it. You've spent enough time in the shadows. It's time for you to step into the light." After he left, Emma lay back on the narrow bed, her hand on her belly. The baby was calm now, occasional gentle movements that felt like reassurance. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Should we take a leap of faith?" As if in response, the baby kicked strong, decisive, unmistakable. Despite everything, Emma smiled. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Antonio brought her food, insisting she eat for the baby's sake. Other staff members stopped by: Maria, the housekeeper, James, the driver, even Marcus, the groundskeeper, shamefaced, and unable to meet her eyes, mumbling an apology before fleeing. The story of what had happened in the ballroom had spread like wildfire through the servant quarters and beyond. Emma's phone, usually silent except for doctor's appointment reminders, buzzed constantly with messages. Numbers she didn't recognize, all claiming to have been at the wedding, all praising her performance and her courage. One was from Carolyn Astor herself, offering support and asking if Emma needed anything. It was surreal, like she'd fallen into someone else's life. Around midnight, another knock came at her door. Emma expected Antonio, or maybe Richard again, but instead found a woman she didn't recognize, elegant, perhaps 60, with silver hair and knowing eyes. "Miss Wilson, I'm Grace Chen, David's wife. May I?" Emma gestured her in acutely aware of how the elegant woman looked out of place in the shabby room. "My husband can be overwhelming," Grace said, settling into the chair as if it were a throne. "All business all the time. But I wanted to speak with you woman to woman. About the contract. About your life." Grace's eyes were kind but sharp. "I was at the wedding tonight. I saw what that horrible woman tried to do to you. I also saw how you responded with more grace and dignity than she could ever hope to possess." Emma said nothing, waiting. "The music industry is brutal," Grace continued, "especially for women, especially for mothers, but it can also be transformative. The question is, are you ready for your life to completely change?" "My life has already completely changed," Emma said, touching her belly. "Several times over." Grace smiled. "True, but this would be different. This would be choosing change rather than having it forced upon you. There's power in that choice." "Why do you care?" "Because 35 years ago I was you," Grace said simply. "Pregnant alone, scrubbing floors to survive. Then someone heard me singing while I worked and offered me a chance. I took it. It wasn't easy, God knows it wasn't easy, but it gave me and my daughter a life I never could have imagined." "You were a singer." "Still am occasionally. But I found my true calling in artist development. Helping young women like you navigate the industry, avoid the pitfalls, build sustainable careers." She leaned forward. "Emma, you have something special. Not just your voice, though, that's exceptional. You have authenticity. In an industry full of manufactured pop stars and auto-tuned mediocrity, you're real. That's worth its weight in gold." "I don't know anything about the music business. I failed in Nashville." "You didn't fail. You survived. There's a difference." Grace stood pulling a card from her purse. "Think about it. Talk to David tomorrow. But know this, if you say yes, I'll personally oversee your development. You won't be alone in this." After she left, Emma sat in the dark holding the expensive business card. Outside her small window, she could see the lights from the ballroom, where the reception continued without bride or groom. The bass from the music thumped faintly through the walls. She thought about Nashville, about all the doors that had slammed in her face. She thought about Jake, who'd promised her the moon and delivered only heartbreak. She thought about the past 8 months of cleaning toilets and enduring humiliation of hiding her voice like a shameful secret. Then she thought about tonight, the moment when her voice had filled that ballroom, when 300 people had risen to their feet in appreciation. The moment when she'd stopped being invisible. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video someone had recorded her performance of Rise from the Ashes. The quality wasn't great, clearly shot on a phone, but her voice came through, clear and powerful. The caption read, "Who is this woman? Someone find her, this is going viral." Emma clicked on the share count. In the 2 hours since it had been posted, the video had been shared over 10,000 times. She set the phone down with shaking hands. This was happening whether she was ready or not. A sudden sharp pain made her gasp. It started in her lower back and wrapped around to her abdomen like a vice. Emma breathed through it the way she'd learned in her prenatal classes. Braxton Hicks contractions probably brought on by stress. They'd been happening more frequently lately. Another knock at the door. This time it was Richard again, but he wasn't alone. A man in his 50s stood beside him, Asian, wearing jeans and a button-down instead of wedding finery, with an energy that seemed to vibrate from him. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," Richard said. But David insisted. "You're going to be famous," David Chen said, without preamble, holding up his phone. "That video of you singing has had 50,000 shares in the last hour. By morning, it'll be in the millions. I've been in this business 30 years, and I've never seen anything explode like this. Emma stared at him. That's not how is that possible? Because you're the real deal, David said, entering the room without invitation. Do you know how rare that is, someone who can sing like that with that much emotion, that much authenticity? And your story pregnant, working as a maid, standing up to that witch. It's like a movie. People are eating it up. David, give her space to breathe, Richard said. But David was on a roll. I want to sign you tonight. Right now. Before every other label in the country starts calling. We'll record your first album while you're still pregnant. The imagery alone will be iconic. Then after the baby comes, we'll do a comeback tour. The single mother rising from the ashes, just like your song. It's perfect. Emma started, but another contraction cut her off. This one was stronger, making her grip the bed frame. Emma? Richard stepped forward, concerned. Are you all right? Just Braxton Hicks, she managed through gritted teeth. The stress. But as the contraction eased, another followed almost immediately. This wasn't practice. This was real. I think, Emma said slowly, I'm in labor. The two men stared at her. But you're only 6 months, Richard began. 28 weeks, Emma corrected, breathing through another contraction. Viable but early. I need to get to the hospital. What followed was controlled chaos. Richard called for his driver, while David called 911, insisting on an ambulance despite Emma's protests that she could make it in a car. Antonio appeared as if by magic, throwing essentials into a bag, with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. My daughter came early too, he said, helping Emma to her feet. 29 weeks. She's a doctor now, remember, strong as an ox. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their professional calm, a stark contrast to the panic Emma felt building in her chest. This was too early. The baby wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. As they loaded her into the ambulance, she caught sight of the ballroom windows. The reception was still going on, guests dancing and drinking, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the service quarters. It seemed fitting somehow her life had always existed in the shadows of their world. I'm coming with you, Richard announced, climbing into the ambulance before anyone could protest. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His face was set with determination. No one should go through this alone. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, Emma closed her eyes and prayed to God, to the universe, to anyone who might be listening. She'd survived so much already. Surely she could survive this too. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and medical terminology. Doctors speaking in urgent tones about gestational age and lung development, and steroid shots to help the baby's lungs mature. Emma heard it all through a fog of pain and fear. The baby's in distress, someone said. Heart rate is dropping. We need to do an emergency C-section. No, Emma gasped. It's too early. We don't have a choice, the doctor said gently but firmly. If we wait, we could lose the baby. Emma looked around wildly and found Richard still there, still in his wedding tuxedo, now rumpled and stained with her tears. You're not alone, he said, taking her hand. I'm right here. As they wheeled her into surgery, Emma thought she heard music, her own voice echoing from somewhere far away. The video still spreading across the internet like wildfire, carrying her song to millions of strangers. She'd wanted to be heard, to matter, to leave some mark on the world. Be careful what you wish for, she thought, as the anesthesia took hold. You might just get it. The first thing Emma heard was beeping. Steady, rhythmic, mechanical. Then voices distant and muffled as if coming through water. She tried to open her eyes, but her lids felt weighted with lead. Her throat was dry, her body heavy, and there was a strange emptiness where her baby had been. "The baby," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "She's alive." Richard's voice came from somewhere to her left. "She's in the NICU, but she's fighting, just like her mother." Emma had a daughter. The knowledge settled into her bones like warmth. Her eyes finally cooperated, blinking open, to find herself in a private hospital room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, morning light, though she had no idea which morning. Richard sat in a chair beside her bed, still wearing his wedding clothes, though they were wrinkled beyond salvation. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "How long?" Emma managed. 14 hours since the surgery. You lost a lot of blood. They had to transfuse you twice." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Emma, you almost died. But the baby, my daughter, 3 pounds 2 ounces, tiny but breathing on her own with just a little oxygen support. The doctors say that's remarkable for 28 weeks. Richard's smile was exhausted but genuine. "She's got your fighting spirit already." Emma tried to sit up, wincing at the pull of stitches across her abdomen. "I need to see her. Soon. The nurses want to make sure you're stable first." He paused, then added quietly, "You should know the media has gone insane. That video from the wedding has over 5 million views now. Reporters are camping outside the hospital. David Chen has been fielding calls from every major news outlet in the country." Emma's head spun. "That's not possible." "I'm afraid it is. Someone leaked that you were here, that you'd gone into labor right after the confrontation with Vanessa. They're calling you the Maid who sang truth to power. Social media is going crazy. There's already a hashtag, Rise from the Ashes." It was too much. Emma had wanted to be heard, yes, but not like this. Not with her daughter fighting for life in an incubator, while strangers dissected her story for entertainment. "I can't deal with this right now," she whispered. "You don't have to. I've hired security to keep the media away. No one gets in here without your permission." Richard hesitated, then added, "Vanessa's father called. He wants to apologize for his daughter's behavior. Apparently, the social backlash has been significant. She's been dropped from 3 charity boards already." Emma felt no satisfaction at the news. All she felt was tired, so deeply tired that it seemed to seep into her very soul. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse entered, young and cheerful, her scrubs covered in cartoon storks. "Good morning, Ms. Wilson. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Emma admitted. "That's normal after what you've been through." The nurse checked various monitors and IV bags with practiced efficiency. "The good news is you're recovering well, and I heard from the NICU that your little girl is exceeding all expectations. Would you like to see her?" "Yes," Emma said immediately. "Please." Getting out of bed was an ordeal. Every movement sent fire through her incision, and her legs felt like jelly. But with Richard on one side and the nurse on the other, Emma managed to get into a wheelchair. The journey to the NICU felt endless through hallways that smelled of disinfectant and echoed with the constant soundtrack of hospital life. The NICU was another world, entirely dim lights, soft voices, and the constant hum of machines keeping tiny humans alive. Emma's daughter was in an incubator near the window, and the sight of her stole what little breath Emma had left. She was impossibly small, not much bigger than Richard's hand. Her skin was translucent, showing the delicate network of veins beneath. She wore a tiny knit cap, pink with a white bow, and had leads attached to her chest, monitoring her vital signs. But she was breathing, her tiny chest rising and falling, with determined regularity. "Oh," Emma breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, she's perfect." "You can touch her," the NICU nurse said gently. "Just wash your hands first, and be very gentle." Emma scrubbed her hands with the thoroughness of a surgeon, then reached through the port in the incubator. Her finger, impossibly large in comparison, stroked her daughter's tiny hand. Immediately, those impossible small fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength. "Hi, baby," Emma whispered. "I'm your mama. I'm so sorry you had to come early, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay. You're going to be amazing." "Have you thought of a name?" Richard asked softly. Emma hadn't. She'd been so focused on survival, on making it through each day, that she hadn't allowed herself to dream about things like names. But looking at her daughter now, one came to her immediately. "Lily," she said. "Lily Grace. Because lilies grow from bulbs buried in the dark earth, and grace is what saved us both." She sat there for an hour, just watching Lily breathe, memorizing every detail of her tiny face. Other parents moved around them, tending to their own precious, fragile miracles. It was a club no one wanted to join, but everyone in it understood the terror and hope of watching your child fight for every breath. Eventually, exhaustion forced Emma back to her room. As Richard helped her back into bed, she noticed an enormous bouquet of roses on the side table, white ones mixed with pink, elegant and expensive. "Those weren't here before," she said. Richard looked uncomfortable. "They're from the wedding guests. Apparently after you left in the ambulance, Caroline Astor organized a collection. Not for flowers originally, but for you and the baby. When I told them you'd prefer something practical to flowers, they raised $30,000 for Lily's medical expenses." Emma stared at him. $30,000. Caroline said it was the least they could do after witnessing what Vanessa put you through. She also said to tell you that her family's foundation would like to discuss a scholarship program for single mothers pursuing careers in the arts, named after you. It was surreal. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible, the help barely worthy of notice. Now strangers were raising money for her daughter and naming scholarships after her. "This doesn't feel real," Emma said. "I know, but Emma, you need to understand something." Richard sat in the chair beside her bed, his expression serious. "What happened last night, what you did, it touched something in people. You stood up there pregnant and exhausted, wearing that horrible dress Vanessa chose to humiliate you, and you sang truth. Raw, honest, powerful truth. In a world full of facades and pretense, you were devastatingly real. I was just trying to survive." "No, you were surviving with grace, with dignity, with art." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. "Listen to some of these comments on the video. This woman is everything the music industry needs. I've watched this 15 times and cry every time. Where can I buy her music? If she doesn't get a record deal, there's no justice in the world. They don't even know me. They know enough. They know you're a fighter. They know you have a gift. They know you've been knocked down and got back up." He paused. David wasn't exaggerating. Every label in the country is trying to find you. He's had to turn his phone off. As if summoned by his name, David Chen appeared in the doorway, looking haggard but excited. Grace was with him, carrying a leather portfolio. "Thank God you're awake," David said without preamble. "We need to talk strategy." "David, she just had major surgery," Grace admonished. I know, but the iron is hot. We need to strike." And he pulled up a chair, his energy filling the room. "Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. This kind of viral moment doesn't come along often. We need to capitalize on it, but we need to do it right." My daughter is in the NICU, Emma said flatly. I don't care about capitalizing on anything. Of course, of course. Lily comes first. Always. David's expression softened. I have 3 kids of my own. I get it. But Emma, this could set you and Lily up for life. No more cleaning houses. No more wondering how you'll pay for diapers or formula, or God forbid medical bills. This is your shot. Grace intervened, her tone gentler. What David is trying to say, rather indelicately, is that we want to help you build something sustainable. Not 15 minutes of fame, but a real career. One that will provide for you and Lily long term. Emma looked at them, these successful, powerful people who were suddenly interested in her. It felt like a dream, or maybe a fever hallucination brought on by pain medication. What would it involve? She asked cautiously. David leaned forward eagerly. First, we release Rise from the Ashes as a single. Today, while the video is still viral. We've already got a studio version we can produce quickly. You'll record vocals as soon as you're able, but we can work with what we have from the wedding for now. You recorded the wedding. The videographer Vanessa hired got everything. Richard convinced him to hand over the footage. David's grin was shark-like. The audio quality is actually excellent. We can clean it up, add some subtle instrumentation, and have it on streaming platforms by tonight. That seems fast. It has to be fast. The internet has the attention span of a goldfish. But if we do this right, we can build something lasting from this moment. He pulled out a contract. I'm offering you a 3-album deal. Significant advance enough to buy a house, pay for Lily's college, set you up properly. Plus, Grace will personally oversee your artistic development. Emma's head was spinning. This morning she'd been a maid. Now she was being offered a record deal that would change everything. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need, Grace said, shooting David a warning look. We're not going anywhere. After they left, Emma found herself alone with Richard again. He'd been so constant through all of this man who should have been on his honeymoon with his new wife instead of sitting in a hospital room with his maid. Why are you here? She asked quietly. You barely know me. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something about Margaret, my first wife? Emma nodded. She was like you. Not the circumstances, but the spirit. She was a teacher in a rough school district when we met. Everyone told her to transfer somewhere easier, somewhere safer. But she stayed because those kids needed her. She fought for them every day, even when the system fought against her. His eyes were distant, lost in memory. When she was dying, she made me promise something. She made me promise that I wouldn't let comfort make me indifferent. That I wouldn't become one of those rich men who forget what struggle looks like. And then you met Vanessa. And then I met Vanessa. He agreed with a bitter laugh. I forgot my promise. I let myself be seduced by beauty and charm, and the easy life she offered. No challenges, no depth, just smooth surfaces and pretty pictures. You couldn't have known what she was really like. Couldn't I? The signs were there. The way she treated the staff, the little cruelties she dismissed as jokes. I chose not to see them because it was easier not to. He met Emma's eyes. But then you sang last night, and it was like Margaret's voice coming through you. Not literally, but the same spirit, the same refusal to be diminished, the same insistence on truth even when lies would be easier. Emma didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. I'm not trying to insert myself into your life, Richard continued. But I want to help if you'll let me. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because it's the right thing to do. And because Margaret would have liked you. She would have liked you very much. A soft cry from down the hall interrupted them, not Lily, but another baby in the NICU. It reminded Emma of where she was, of how fragile everything still was. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "As someone who knows the world I'd be entering if I take this deal, of course. Will they eat me alive, the music industry, the media, the public? I'm not naive, I know what they do to people, especially women. They build them up just to tear them down. And I have Lily to think about now. What kind of life would she have with a famous mother? Would she hate me for it?" Richard considered the question seriously. "It's a valid concern. The industry can be brutal. The public can be cruel. But Emma, you've already survived brutal and cruel. You've been at the bottom and you've risen. That's more than most people in that world can say. But Lily will grow up with a mother who fought for her dreams, who didn't let circumstances define her, who sang truth in a room full of lies. What better example could you give her?" Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. She'd been ignoring it for hours, but this time she looked. The screen was full of notifications, mentions, tags, messages from numbers she didn't recognize. But one stood out, Jake. Her blood went cold. The father of her child, the man who'd abandoned her the moment responsibility appeared, was calling. After 8 months of silence, he was calling now. She declined the call, but immediately a text appeared. "Saw the video. We should talk." "Problem?" Richard asked, noticing her expression. "Jake," Emma said simply. "The baby's father. He's apparently seen the video too." Richard's face darkened. "The musician who left you. What does he want?" "Probably to see if there's money involved now." Emma deleted the message with more force than necessary. "He made his choice 8 months ago. He doesn't get to change his mind now that I'm internet famous." But even as she said it, worry gnawed at her. Jake knew how to be charming when he wanted something. And if he decided he wanted back into her life, or worse, into Lily's life, he could make things complicated. Another knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. This time it was Antonio carrying a covered tray that smelled like heaven. "Hospital food is poison," he declared, setting the tray on the rolling table. "I brought you real food, soup bread, and that herbal tea you like." Emma's eyes filled with tears. After everything, this simple kindness undid her. "Antonio, you didn't have to. Family doesn't have to," he said firmly. "Family just does." "I'm not family." "Mija, you became family the moment you stood up to that witch, with nothing but your voice and your courage. The staff at the house, we've all been talking. We're all behind you. Whatever you decide to do next, you have support." He uncovered the tray, revealing not just soup, but a small pink teddy bear. "For the little one," he said gruffly. "Every baby needs a bear." Emma clutched the bear to her chest, overwhelmed by the kindness. "How's the house? Is everyone okay after last night?" Antonio's expression turned grim. "Chaos. Vanessa came back this morning with her father and a team of lawyers. Tried to claim abandonment that Richard left her at the altar. Richard's lawyers shut that down quick. Too many witnesses heard what she said. She's moved out, took her things. The staff is breathing easier already. I should come back to work. You should do nothing but heal and take care of that baby," Antonio said firmly. "The house will survive without you. Focus on what matters." After he left, Emma found herself holding the teddy bear and staring at the contract David had left behind. 3 albums, a real career, a chance to be more than just another sad story. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message from Carolyn Astor. Emma opened it cautiously. Caroline's face filled the screen, her expression earnest. "Emma, I know you don't know me well, but I wanted to say something. What you did last night, it wasn't just brave. It was necessary. Those of us born into privilege, we forget sometimes what real struggle looks like, what real triumph looks like. You reminded us. You reminded us that talent and worth aren't determined by bank accounts or bloodlines. I hope you take the record deal. The world needs voices like yours, voices that tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. The message ended, and Emma found herself crying again. Hormones, she told herself, but it was more than that. It was the recognition that something had shifted in the world, even if just a little. Her voice, the voice of a nobody, a maid, a pregnant woman abandoned and alone, had been heard. And it had mattered. She thought about Lily down the hall, fighting for every breath, with a determination that seemed impossible in something so small. Her daughter would grow up in a world where her mother's story was public knowledge, where the video of that wedding performance would live forever on the internet. Would she be proud or embarrassed? Would she understand why Emma had stood up there and sung her truth? Or would she wish her mother had stayed silent and invisible? There was no way to know. But Emma thought about all the times she'd stayed silent with Jake, with employers who treated her as less than human, with a world that told her she didn't matter. Silence hadn't protected her. It had only made her smaller. No more getting smaller, she whispered to herself, to Lily, to the universe. We're going to take up space in this world. She reached for the contract. The next few days blurred together in a haze of medical checks, NICU visits, and overwhelming media attention. David had been right about the urgency. Rise from the Ashes was released as a single 3 days after the wedding, and it immediately shot to the top of the streaming charts. Emma recorded vocals from her hospital bed, David bringing in a mobile setup that transformed her room into a makeshift studio. "This is insane," the sound engineer said, adjusting levels on his laptop. "I've recorded tracks in some weird places, but never in a maternity ward." Emma sat propped up in bed, headphones on, trying to ignore the pull of her stitches. Through the window, she could see news vans still parked outside, waiting for any glimpse of the woman whose story had captured the nation's attention. "From the top," David instructed through the headphones. "And Emma, don't try to make it perfect. The rawness is what people connected with." So Emma sang her voice, carrying all the exhaustion and fear and hope of the past few days. She sang for Lily, who was gaining weight slowly but steadily. She sang for every woman who'd been told she didn't matter. She sang for the girl she'd been in Nashville, full of dreams and untested courage. When they finished, the engineer was crying. Christ, that was powerful. "It'll need some production work," David said, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "But the emotion is there. The authenticity. This is going to be huge, Emma. Bigger than the viral video." He was right. Within 24 hours of release, Rise from the Ashes had been streamed over 10 million times. Cover versions started appearing on social media. A famous actress posted a video of herself crying while listening to it, captioned, "This is what truth sounds like." The hashtag Rise from the Ashes started trending globally, but Emma barely noticed any of it. Her world had shrunk to the size of an incubator where Lily fought her quiet battle. Every ounce gained was a victory. Every hour without a breathing episode was a celebration. The nurses knew her by name, now smiled when they saw her coming in her wheelchair, then, eventually on her own feet as she healed. Richard remained a constant presence, which the media had noticed. Speculation ran rampant about the nature of their relationship, especially given his very public split from Vanessa. He'd offered to stay away if the attention bothered her, but Emma had refused. "You've been here since the beginning," she told him. Don't leave now because of some gossip. The truth was she'd come to depend on his steady presence. He didn't want anything from her, not her story, not her newfound fame, not her gratitude. He just sat with her during the long NICU vigils, brought her decent coffee, and occasionally shared stories about Margaret that made them both cry. It was during one of those vigils 2 weeks after Lily's birth that Jake appeared. Emma was alone for once, Richard having gone to deal with some business crisis, and David in meetings with distribution partners. She was sitting beside Lily's incubator, reading aloud from a book of fairy tales, when she sensed someone behind her. She turned, and there he was. Jake Matthews, looking exactly as he had 8 months ago, artfully disheveled hair, vintage band t-shirt, guitar case slung over his shoulder like he'd just come from a gig. As if no time had passed. As if he hadn't disappeared the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy. "Hey, Em," he said with that crooked smile that had once made her heart race. Now it just made her stomach turn. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was ice. "I came to see you. To see—" His eyes found Lily in the incubator, and something flickered across his face. "Is that her? That's none of your business. She's my daughter, too." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Emma stood slowly positioning herself between Jake and the incubator. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "She's not. You gave up any claim to her when you told me to take care of it and walked away, when you blocked my number, when you left me pregnant and alone with nothing but broken promises." "I was scared," Jake said, attempting to look contrite. "I wasn't ready to be a father. But seeing that video, seeing you up there singing M, it changed everything. You were magnificent. And I realized what I'd thrown away." "What you threw away," Emma repeated slowly. "Not who, what." Jake had the grace to look ashamed, but he pushed forward. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I want to make it right. I want to be part of her life. Part of your life." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to be part of my life now that I have a record deal, now that I'm famous. Where were you when I was throwing up every morning and working double shifts to pay for prenatal vitamins? Where were you when I was sleeping in a closet-sized room being humiliated daily just to keep a roof over my head? I told you I was scared, and I wasn't." Emma's voice rose, drawing looks from the NICU nurses. She forced herself to lower it, mindful of the fragile babies around them. "I was terrified every single day, but I didn't have the luxury of running away. I had to stay and face it because that's what mothers do." Jake stepped closer, and Emma could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn the night they'd met, the night he'd promised her they'd conquer Nashville together. "Emma, please. I know I hurt you, but we had something special once. We could have it again. Think about what's chemist for the baby. She deserves a father. She deserves a father who wanted her from the moment she existed," Emma said. "Not one who shows up when it's convenient, when there's something to gain. That's not fair." "Fair." Emma's control snapped. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you staying to have even one conversation about our options. Fair would have been you helping with even one doctor's appointment. Fair would have been you acting like a decent human being instead of a selfish coward." "I could fight for custody," Jake said, and there it was, the threat she'd been expecting. "I have rights." "You have nothing," a cold voice said from behind them. Richard stood in the doorway, his expression dangerous. "You have no rights to a child you abandoned. No claim on a woman you left to struggle alone. And certainly no place here in this room disturbing the peace of these sick children." Jake turned, taking in Richard's expensive suit, his air of authority. "And you are—" Someone who was there when you weren't, Richard said simply. Someone who held Emma's hand during an emergency C-section while you were doing whatever it is you do. Playing coffee shops. Seducing other naive girls with promises you don't intend to keep. This isn't your business. It became my business when I watched Emma nearly die, bringing that beautiful little girl into the world. It became my business when I've sat here every day watching her pour her heart into that child while you were nowhere to be found. Richard stepped forward, and though he didn't touch Jake, the younger man stepped back. Now you're going to leave. Quietly, without causing any more distress. And if you come near Emma or Lily again, you'll be dealing with a team of lawyers who will make your life very complicated. Jake looked between them, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. This isn't over, he said to Emma. That's my kid too, and I have rights. Then exercise them through the proper legal channels, Richard said coolly. I'm sure the court will be very interested to hear how you've supported your child so far. Oh wait, you haven't. Not a penny. Not a moment of time. Not even a text to ask if they were okay. Jake left his guitar case banging against the doorframe in his haste. Emma sank into the chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. Thank you, she whispered. Richard crouched beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. You don't have to face him alone, or anything else for that matter. Why are you so good to me? Because you deserve goodness, he said simply. You've had enough people in your life who've given you less than you deserve. It's time for that to change. That night, Emma lay in her hospital bed. She still hadn't been officially discharged, though she spent most of her time in the NICU and thought about fathers. About Jake, who'd contributed DNA and nothing else. About her own father, who'd died when she was 12, leaving her mother to struggle alone. About Richard, who had no biological connection to Lily, but had been there for every milestone so far. Biology didn't make a father, she realized. Choice did. Presence did. Jake had chosen absence. Richard had chosen presence. It was that simple and that complicated. Her phone rang, David excited about something as always. Emma, I have news. Big news. The single has been #1 for 3 days straight. Labels are calling me trying to poach you. I'm talking major money. But more importantly, the Grammys want you to perform. Emma sat up so fast her incision protested. What? The Grammys. In 2 months. They want you to perform Rise from the Ashes live. It's unprecedented for someone without an album, but the song has become a cultural phenomenon. They're calling it the anthem of the year. David. I can't. Lily will still be in the NICU. Probably I can't leave her. We'll work it out. We'll film something if we have to. But Emma, this is the Grammys. This is the biggest stage in music. The girl who went to Nashville with a suitcase full of dreams gets to stand on the stage she dreamed about. After he hung up, Emma sat in the darkness, overwhelmed by how fast everything was moving. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a pregnant maid scrubbing floors. Now she was being invited to perform at the Grammys. It felt like someone else's life. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Grace Chen entered carrying 2 cups of tea. David told me about the Grammys, she said, handing Emma a cup. It's a lot to process, I know. It's too much, Emma admitted. Everything's happening so fast. I haven't even properly held my daughter yet, and they want me to think about performing on national television. Grace sat in the visitor's chair, her expression thoughtful. Can I tell you something? When I was offered my first major opportunity, my daughter was 3 months old. I was terrified of leaving her, of failing, of succeeding. My mother told me something I've never forgotten. Your dreams don't make you a bad mother. They make you a whole person, and whole people raise whole children. But what if something happens to Lily while I'm gone? What if she needs me and I'm not here? Then you come back, Grace said simply. The music industry has survived for centuries. It can wait for a mother who needs to be with her child. But Emma, you can't put your entire life on hold out of fear. That's not living, that's just existing. I existed for 8 months, Emma said quietly. Maybe I need more practice at living. Or maybe, Grace suggested gently, you need to trust that you can do both. Be a mother and an artist. Be present for Lily and pursue your dreams. It's not easy, but it's possible. I'm living proof. The next morning brought a breakthrough. Lily was breathing entirely on her own, no oxygen support needed. She was still tiny, still fragile, but she was winning her battle. The doctor said if she continued improving, she might be able to go home in another month. Home. Emma realized she didn't actually have one. Her room at the Bennett mansion was no longer an option, and she certainly couldn't bring a premature baby back to the studio apartment she'd had before working there. As if reading her mind, Richard appeared with a folder. I've found some options, he said, spreading out real estate listings. All close to the hospital for Lily's follow-up appointments. All in safe neighborhoods with good schools for later. Richard, I can't afford. You have a signing bonus from the record deal, he reminded her. Plus the fun the wedding guests created. Plus what will come from the single's success. You can afford more than you think. Emma looked at the listings, actual houses with bedrooms and yards and space for a child to grow. It seemed impossible that these could be within her reach. This one, Richard said, pointing to a modest but charming cottage. It's perfect. 3 bedrooms so you can have a home studio. Big kitchen for when Lily's older and you're making midnight bottles, garden where she can play. And look, he pointed to another paper. It's 3 blocks from an excellent preschool and walking distance to a park. You've really thought about this. I've had a lot of time to think while sitting in the NICU, he admitted. Emma, I know you're independent. I know you don't want charity. But everyone needs help sometimes. Let me help you and Lily get started. Consider it an investment in the future, if that makes it easier. Why does the future of a maid and her baby matter so much to you? Richard was quiet for a moment. Because you both represent hope. In a world that often feels hopeless, you're proof that beauty can come from struggle, that truth can triumph over lies, that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Emma looked at the cottage listing again. She could see it, Lily taking her first steps in that living room, playing in that garden, growing up in an actual home instead of a series of temporary shelters. Okay, she said quietly. Let's look at it. The cottage was even better in person than in the pictures. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The walls were painted soft colors, butter yellow, in the kitchen sage green, in what would be Lily's room a gentle blue, in the space Emma already envisioned as her studio. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it was warm and real and possible. The previous owners were musicians too, the real estate agent said, gesturing to built-in shelving, perfect for recording equipment. They soundproofed this room. You could record here without disturbing the baby. Emma ran her fingers along the wall, imagining late-night sessions, while Lily slept, writing songs about their journey, their survival, their triumph. It felt like a dream she didn't deserve to have. We'll take it, Richard said, and Emma didn't even protest. She was too busy picturing Lily's first Christmas in the living room, her first birthday in the garden, all the firsts that would happen within these walls. The paperwork was signed within days, and suddenly Emma owned a home. The girl who'd been homeless just months ago, sleeping in her car between failed auditions, now had her name on a deed. She sat in the empty living room the day she got the keys, tears streaming down her face. Happy tears, she assured Richard, who'd driven her there while Lily remained in the NICU. I just never imagined this. You earned it, he said simply. With your voice, your courage, your refusal to be broken. Moving in would have to wait. Lily needed her at the hospital, but Emma spent stolen hours between NICU visits furnishing the space. Grace Chen appeared one afternoon with a truck full of baby furniture, claiming her daughter had outgrown it. Antonio brought pots and pans, insisting no home was complete without proper cooking equipment. Even Carolyn Astor showed up with an absurdly expensive sound system for the studio and a pile of children's books for later. The kindness was overwhelming. Emma had spent so long being invisible, being less than that being seen and valued felt like stepping into bright light after years in darkness. Meanwhile, the music world was clamoring for more. David fielded offers, daily collaboration requests from established artists, interview requests from major media outlets, appearance fees that made Emma's head spin. But she turned most of them down. Lily came first. The music would wait. You're leaving money on the table, David warned during one of his visits. The momentum won't last forever. Then it doesn't last, Emma said firmly, watching Lily sleep through the incubator. I won't be one of those mothers who chooses fame over their child. No one's asking you to choose. But Emma, you have a gift. And now you have a platform. Don't you want to use it? She did want to use it. Late at night, when the NICU was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors, songs came to her. Not just about her own story, but about all the invisible women she'd known, the other maids, the single mothers at the free clinic, the dreamers whose dreams had been deferred or destroyed. She hummed melodies into her phone, wrote lyrics on hospital napkins, built an album in her mind, while keeping vigil over her daughter. 3 weeks after the cottage purchase, Lily hit 5 pounds, the magic number the doctors had been waiting for. She could maintain her own body temperature. She was eating well, gaining steadily. The talk shifted from when she's stable to when she can go home. Maybe another week, Dr. Martinez said, checking Lily's chart. She's exceeded every expectation. Must get her fighting spirit from her mother. That evening, Emma was alone with Lily when she heard familiar voices in the hallway. She looked up to find Vanessa standing in the doorway, accompanied by an older man who shared her sharp features, her father presumably. Emma's body tensed, ready for another attack. But Vanessa looked different, smaller somehow, her designer clothes hanging loose, her face pale without its usual perfect makeup. I'm not here to cause trouble, Vanessa said quickly, seeing Emma's expression. I needed to apologize. Emma said nothing, waiting. What I did at the wedding was inexcusable, Vanessa continued the words, seeming to physically pain her. I was cruel and petty and threatened by you. Threatened by me. Emma couldn't hide her disbelief. I was your maid. You were everything I'm not, Vanessa said quietly. Talented, genuine, someone who earned their place instead of buying it. She took a shaky breath. I've been in therapy since the wedding, trying to understand why I'm like this, why I need to tear others down to feel bigger. Her father stepped forward. What my daughter is trying to say inadequately is that we're deeply sorry for the pain she caused. We'd like to make amends if possible. I don't want your money, Emma said immediately. Not money, the man said, but perhaps something more valuable. I own several entertainment venues in New York and Los Angeles. When you're ready to perform again, you'll have guaranteed bookings. Good venues, good pay on your schedule. It's the least we can do." Emma looked at Vanessa, who seemed to have shrunk into herself. "Why are you really here?" Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "Because I destroyed my own life trying to destroy yours. Richard won't speak to me. The entire social circle I worked so hard to enter has shut me out. My friends, I thought they were friends, they've all disappeared. And watching that video, seeing you sing." She wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara. "You had nothing, and you were magnificent. I had everything, and I was nothing." "You're not nothing," Emma said, surprising herself with the words. "You're just lost. I've been lost too. How did you find your way?" Emma looked at Lily, tiny and perfect in her incubator. "I had someone depending on me to figure it out." Vanessa followed her gaze to the baby. "She's beautiful. I'm so sorry she had to come early. The stress I caused." "She would have come early anyway," Dr. Martinez interrupted from the doorway. "I've reviewed the case. The placental insufficiency was developing for weeks. The stress may have triggered labor, but it didn't cause the underlying condition. In fact, coming when she did might have saved both their lives." It was strange how that information changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Emma still resented Vanessa's cruelty, but the weight of blame lifted slightly. "I don't forgive you," Emma said honestly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I don't wish you ill. I hope you find whatever it is you're really looking for." Vanessa nodded, tears flowing freely now. "That's more than I deserve." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I've been following your success. The single, the Grammy invitation. You're going to be incredible." After they left, Emma sat in the quiet NICU processing the strange encounter. She'd spent so much energy hating Vanessa, but seeing her broken and seeking redemption had drained that hatred away, leaving only exhaustion and a strange sort of pity. "Your mama's learning about grace," she whispered to Lily. "It's harder than holding on to anger, but maybe it's better for us both." The next morning brought the news that she'd been waiting for. Lily could go home in 3 days if she continued improving. Emma burst into tears at the announcement, weeks of tension finally releasing. Home. Her daughter could come home. David arrived that afternoon with contract schedules and plans. "If Lily's going home, we need to discuss the Grammy performance. It's in 6 weeks. You could pre-record it if you're not comfortable leaving her." "No," Emma said, surprising herself. "I want to do it live. I want to stand on that stage and sing for every woman who's been told she's not enough, for every mother who's been judged for her circumstances, for everyone who's been invisible." "That's my girl," David grinned. "Grace has already started working on arrangements. We'll keep it simple but powerful. You, a piano, maybe a small string section. The focus needs to be on your voice and your story." "And what about Jake?" Emma asked. "He's been posting on social media claiming I'm keeping him from his daughter." "Let him post. We've documented everything. His absence, his lack of support, his abandonment. If he wants to make this public, it won't go well for him." David pulled up his phone. "Speaking of which, you should see this." It was a social media post from Carolyn Astor, with a photo of Emma singing at the wedding. "Some people are born to greatness. Others like @EmmaWilson. Music, earn it through courage, talent, and grace under pressure. If you haven't heard Rise from the Ashes, stop what you're doing and listen. Then pre-order her album. Trust me on this." "Album," Emma said. "I don't have an album." "You will," David said confidently. "I've booked studio time starting next month. We'll work around Lily's schedule, but Emma, the songs you've been humming into your phone are incredible. The world needs to hear them." 3 days later, Emma carried Lily out of the hospital for the first time. She was still tiny, just over 5 pounds, but her lungs were clear and her heart was strong. The car seat seemed to swallow her whole, and Emma checked the straps obsessively before Richard drove them to the cottage. Walking through the front door with her daughter in her arms was a moment Emma knew she'd remember forever. The house smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Lily's nursery was ready, soft pink walls, white furniture, the teddy bear from Antonio sitting in the crib. "Welcome home, baby girl," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Welcome to our life." The first night was terrifying. Every sound Lily made had Emma jumping up to check on her. Was she breathing? Was she too hot, too cold? Was that cry normal or a sign of something wrong? By morning, Emma was exhausted but exhilarated. They'd survived their first night at home. Richard arrived with breakfast and found Emma on the couch, Lily sleeping on her chest, both of them bathed in morning sunlight. "You look happy," he said softly, not wanting to wake the baby. "I am," Emma realized with wonder. "Despite everything, or maybe because of everything, I'm actually happy." The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Lily ate every 3 hours, slept in brief intervals, and slowly but steadily gained weight. Emma sang to her constantly lullabies, pop songs, her own compositions. Music seemed to soothe Lily in a way nothing else could, and Emma wondered if her daughter had been listening all those months in the womb, learning her mother's voice from the inside out. Between feedings and diaper changes, Emma worked on her album. Grace came to the cottage with a portable recording setup, transforming the spare room into a legitimate studio. They worked while Lily napped, stopping whenever she cried, building songs around the rhythm of new motherhood. "This is unconventional," Grace admitted, adjusting microphone levels while Emma nursed Lily. "But then again, nothing about your story is conventional." The songs poured out of Emma like water from a broken dam. Songs about love and loss, about strength found in weakness, about the fierce protectiveness of motherhood. One song, Lily's Lullaby, she recorded while actually holding her daughter, the baby's soft breathing audible in the background. "We should edit that out," the sound engineer suggested. "No," Emma said firmly. "Leave it. This is our story exactly as it is." Jake continued his social media campaign, painting himself as a victim denied access to his child. But for every post he made, dozens of people responded with the truth, screenshots of Emma's unanswered messages from months ago, testimonies from people who'd seen him abandon her, reminders that he'd never offered a penny of support. "Let him exhaust himself," Richard advised. "The truth is stronger than his narrative." Richard had become a constant presence in their lives, though he was careful to maintain boundaries. He brought groceries, assembled baby furniture, and held Lily while Emma showered small acts of service that meant everything. But he never pushed for more than friendship, never presumed on the connection that had formed during those hospital vigils. One evening, as Emma was putting Lily to bed, she found Richard in the living room playing her piano, the one he'd had delivered as a housewarming gift, claiming it was for the studio. "I didn't know you played," she said, recognizing the melody as one of her compositions. "Not like you," he said, his fingers stilling on the keys. But music was important to Margaret. She insisted I learn at least the basics. "You miss her?" "Every day. But lately," he paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Lately the grief feels less like drowning and more like a gentle ache, a reminder of love rather than loss." Emma understood. Grief had its own timeline, its own evolution. Her grief for the life she'd planned with Jake had transformed into gratitude for the life she'd built without him. "Play something," she said, settling on the couch with a cup of tea. Richard played not perfectly, but with feeling. The melody was simple but beautiful, speaking of loss and hope intertwined. When he finished, Emma was crying. "Margaret wrote that," he said quietly, when she knew she was dying. She said it was about finding light in endings. "It's beautiful. She would have loved you," Richard said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, she would have loved your music, your strength." Emma knew what he meant and what he wasn't saying. The air between them had been charged with unspoken possibility for weeks now, but neither had acknowledged it. The timing was wrong, the situation too complicated. Emma was still healing physically, emotionally, and Richard was still untangling himself from the disaster of his marriage to Vanessa. But still, the possibility hummed between them like a note waiting to be played. The Grammy performance loomed closer. Emma practiced daily, her voice growing stronger as her body healed. Lily seemed to recognize when her mother was preparing for something important, staying calm during rehearsal sessions as if she understood the music was part of their story. David arranged for a styling team to come to the cottage, dress fittings, hair trials, makeup tests. Emma stood before the mirror in a gown that cost more than she'd made in a year as a maid and hardly recognized herself. "You look like a star," the stylist said, adjusting the drape of fabric. "I look like someone else," Emma countered. "No," Richard said from the doorway, where he'd been watching quietly. "You look like yourself. The self that was always there, just waiting for the world to see." 2 days before the Grammys crisis struck, Lily developed a fever not dangerously high, but enough to terrify Emma. They rushed to the hospital where doctors ran tests and monitored the baby through the night. "It's just a cold," Dr. Martinez finally announced. "Common for preemies. Her immune system is still developing. She'll be fine, but she needs rest and careful monitoring." "I can't leave her," Emma said immediately. "The Grammys I'll cancel." "You will not," Grace said firmly. She'd arrived at the hospital as soon as she heard, as had David and Richard. "We'll work this out." They did work it out with a solution that seemed impossible but somehow yummed together. The Grammy producers, moved by Emma's story, and the circumstances, agreed to let her perform via satellite from a studio in New York, just 20 minutes from the hospital. It was unprecedented, but Emma's story had already broken so many precedents. The night of the Grammys, Emma stood in the small studio, wearing her gorgeous gown, knowing Lily was safe with Richard and a nurse at the hospital. The feed was live. Millions would watch her perform in real time, even though she was 3,000 miles from the actual stage. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself as the countdown began. But when the music started, when she opened her mouth to sing, none of that mattered. She sang for Lily, fighting her small battle in a hospital crib. She sang for every woman watching who'd been told their dreams were too big or their circumstances too limiting. She sang for the girl she'd been scared and pregnant and alone, not knowing that strength was waiting to be discovered in her darkest moment. The performance was raw, emotional, technically perfect, but more importantly, spiritually transcendent. When she hit the final note, the small studio erupted in applause from the skeleton crew present. But more importantly, her phone immediately lit up with messages from the hospital, where Richard reported that Lily's fever had broken, and from Los Angeles, where the celebrity audience had given her a standing ovation. "You did it," David said, pulling her into a hug. "You just became a star on your own terms." But Emma was already pulling off her heels, grabbing her coat. "I need to get to Lily." She arrived at the hospital to find her daughter awake and alert fever gone, reaching for her mother with tiny, determined hands. Emma held her close still in her Grammy gown and sang softly, not for an audience of millions, but for an audience of one. "That was beautiful," Richard said softly. He'd been there all night, she realized, watching over Lily while Emma performed. both the performance and this. This is better, Emma said, kissing Lily's forehead. This will always be better. The Grammy performance changed everything. The single shot back to #1. The album pre-orders exceeded all projections. Interview requests came from every major outlet. But Emma was selective, choosing only those that would respect her boundaries and her story. Her first television interview was with a respected journalist known for thoughtful, in-depth conversations. They filmed it in Emma's cottage with Lily sleeping nearby. "Your story has resonated with millions," the journalist said. "What do you think it is that connects with people?" Emma thought carefully. "I think we all know what it feels like to be unseen. To have dreams that feel too big for our circumstances. To face moments when we have to choose between breaking and breakthrough. My story isn't unique, it's universal. I just got to sing it out loud." And Jake Matthews, Lily's father, he's been vocal about wanting to be involved now. "Jake made his choice when I needed him most," Emma said calmly. "I won't prevent him from knowing Lily if he pursues legal channels and shows genuine commitment. But showing up after the hard part is over, after the success has come. That's not parenting. That's opportunism. Some have criticized you for keeping him away. I'm not keeping him away. I'm protecting my daughter from someone who's already proven he'll abandon her when things get difficult. If he wants to prove he's changed, there are legal ways to do that. But social media posts aren't one of them." The interview aired to massive ratings. Public opinion, already largely on Emma's side, solidified further. Jake's supporters dwindled, and eventually his posts stopped. He'd moved on to the next thing, the next opportunity, the next dream that didn't require actual work. Emma's album, titled From the Ashes, released 3 months after the Grammy performance. It debuted at #1, critically acclaimed and commercially successful. But more importantly to Emma, it told her truth, their truth, hers and Lily's. The tour offers came immediately, but Emma turned them all down. "Not yet," she told David. "Not until Lily's older. Not until I can bring her with me." "You're leaving millions on the table," he warned, though his tone was more admiring than frustrated. "I'm choosing my daughter over money," Emma corrected. "I've been poor, I survived, but I only get one chance to be present for Lily's first years." And instead she did selective performances, a few concerts in New York, always returning home to Lily the same night. Television appearances where Lily could come along. Small, intimate venues where the music mattered more than the spectacle. It was at one of these performances, a benefit concert for single mothers that Carolyn Astor had organized, that everything shifted with Richard. Emma was backstage preparing to go on when she found him in her dressing room with Lily, who was now 6 months old and thriving. He was holding her, making faces that had her giggling, a sound that never failed to make Emma's heart soar. "She looks like you," he said, glancing up at Emma. "Same eyes, same determination, same inability to sleep at reasonable hours," Emma added, adjusting her earrings. "Emma," Richard said suddenly, his tone serious. "I need to tell you something." Her hands stilled. "Okay." "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air like a held breath. Emma turned to face him fully, her heart racing. "I've been in love with you since that night at the wedding, maybe before," he continued. "I've tried to be respectful, to give you space to heal and build your new life. But watching you these past months, your strength, your grace, your devotion to Lily, your incredible talent, I can't keep pretending. I just want to be your friend." Emma crossed the room slowly, taking Lily from his arms and settling her in the portable crib. Then she turned back to Richard, who was watching her with an expression of hope and fear intertwined. "I can't be what Vanessa was," she said quietly. I can't be a trophy wife or a society darling or— I don't want you to be, Richard interrupted. I want you to be exactly who you are. The woman who sings truth in a room full of lies. The mother who chose her daughter over fame. The survivor who turned pain into art. Emma thought about all the reasons this was complicated their history, the public scrutiny it would bring, the difference in their worlds. But then she thought about the nights he'd sat with her in the hospital, the way he looked at Lily with genuine love, the quiet support he'd offered, without asking for anything in return. Lily comes first, she said. Always. As she should. And my music, it's not a hobby or a phase. It's who I am. It's one of the things I love most about you. And we take this slow, very slow. I'm still figuring out who I am in this new life. We have all the time in the world, Richard said, hope blooming in his eyes. Emma stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, to see the silver threads in his dark hair. Then okay, we can try. We can see what this is. He kissed her, then soft and careful, as if she might disappear. It was nothing like Jake's passionate but empty promises. It was solid and real and felt like coming home. A knock at the door interrupted them. 5 minutes, Ms. Wilson, the stage manager called. Emma pulled back, touching her lips with wonder. I have to go sing now. Go, Richard said, smiling. Go show them what truth sounds like. She walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was full of women like her, single mothers, survivors, dreamers, whose dreams had taken unexpected shapes. As the music began, Emma found Richard in the wings, holding Lily, who was watching her mother with wide, fascinated eyes. This song, Emma said into the microphone, is for anyone who's been told they're not enough, for anyone who's had to rebuild from ashes, for anyone who's discovered that sometimes the life you never planned is exactly the one you were meant to live. She sang Rise from the Ashes, but it sounded different now, not like a song of survival, but of triumph. Not a lament for what was lost, but a celebration of what was found. The audience rose to their feet before she even finished, tears streaming down faces, hands raised in solidarity and celebration. Emma saw herself in every one of them, women who'd been knocked down and got back up, who'd been told they were nothing and proved they were everything. As the last note faded, as the applause washed over her like a wave, Emma looked at Richard and Lily in the wings. Her unlikely family built from the ruins of what she'd thought she wanted. It wasn't the life she'd planned when she'd set off for Nashville with a suitcase full of dreams. It was so much more. The months that followed felt like learning to breathe underwater, possible, but requiring constant adjustment. Emma's relationship with Richard evolved slowly, carefully, like a song being composed one note at a time. They were photographed, leaving the benefit concert together, and by morning, the headlines screamed about the billionaire and the Maid. But Emma had learned to let the noise wash over her without letting it in. Lily grew stronger every day, her premature start becoming less and less relevant as she hit milestone after milestone. At 7 months, she was sitting up on her own, babbling constantly in what Emma swore was her own form of singing. The cottage that had once felt impossibly large for just the two of them now felt perfectly sized for their small but growing circle. Richard was careful about boundaries, never staying overnight, always asking before assuming his presence was welcome. But gradually, his things began to appear in the cottage, a coffee mug in the kitchen, a spare phone charger in the living room, a sweater draped over the chair he'd claimed as his own. He was falling in love with Lily as much as he'd already fallen for Emma, and watching him read to her daughter in the evening had become Emma's favorite part of the day. "You're good at this," Emma told him one evening, as he expertly changed Lily's diaper, a task that had taken him weeks to master. "I always wanted children," he admitted, fastening the fresh diaper with practiced ease. "Margaret and I tried for years, but it never happened. After she died, I assumed that door had closed." Emma watched him lift Lily, who immediately grabbed his nose with her tiny fingers, making him laugh. "Doors have a way of opening when we least expect them." The music world hadn't forgotten about Emma. From the Ashes had gone platinum, and David was constantly fielding offers, collaborations, endorsement deals, a documentary about her story. But Emma remained selective, protective of the life she was building. "You're not maximizing your moment," David complained during one of their meetings at the cottage, papers spread across the kitchen table while Lily napped in her bouncer. "I'm maximizing my life," Emma countered. "There's a difference." It was Grace who understood best, often serving as a buffer between Emma's artistic needs and David's commercial instincts. She'd become more than a mentor. She was becoming a friend, one of the few people who understood the delicate balance of motherhood and artistry. "The world will wait for great art," Grace said during one of their studio sessions. "It won't wait for your daughter's childhood." Emma was working on her second album, but slowly, organically letting the songs come as they wanted rather than forcing them. Many were about Lily, about the transformation of becoming a mother. Others were about second chances, about love that arrives after you've stopped believing in it. One song in particular, Unexpected, was clearly about Richard, though Emma hadn't admitted it yet. She was recording the demo when he arrived at the cottage, unexpectedly, flowers in hand, not roses, which reminded them both of the wedding, but wildflowers, imperfect and beautiful. "Am I interrupting?" he asked from the doorway of her home studio. "Just finishing," Emma said, removing her headphones. "Want to hear?" She played the rough track, watching his face as her voice filled the room, singing about love that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but builds slowly, steadily, like a house being constructed brick by brick. When it ended, Richard's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. Is it about us?" "Maybe," Emma admitted, then laughed at herself. "Yes, it's about us. About how you weren't what I expected, but exactly what we needed." He crossed the room and kissed her deeper than before, with 6 months of careful courtship behind them and a future spreading out ahead. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I want more," Richard said. "More than stolen evenings and careful boundaries. I want to wake up with you and Lily. I want to be a real family." Emma's heart raced, but she forced herself to think clearly. "Richard, you know what my life is. Late-night feedings, early morning recording sessions, the circus of public attention. It's not the quiet, elegant life you're used to." "The quiet, elegant life nearly killed me with boredom," he said. "Emma, you and Lily have brought more joy into my world in 6 months than I've felt in years. I don't want to visit your life. I want to share it." Before Emma could respond, Lily woke from her nap with a cry that quickly escalated to a wail. They both moved toward her, a practiced dance, now Richard preparing a bottle while Emma soothed her daughter. "See?" Emma said as Lily's cries intensified. "This is the reality. It's not all Grammy performances and romantic songs." "I know," Richard said, testing the bottle temperature before handing it to Emma. "It's also spit up on designer suits and 3 a.m. wake-ups and teething pain. I've been here for enough of it to know what I'm asking for." Lily settled as she ate, her eyes moving between Emma and Richard, as if following their conversation. "Let me think about it," Emma said finally. "This isn't just about us anymore. Every decision I make affects her." Richard nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. I've waited this long to find you both. I can wait longer." That night, after Richard had gone home, he still maintained his mansion, though he spent less and less time there. Emma sat in Lily's nursery, rocking her daughter to sleep. The room was softly lit by a nightlight that projected stars onto the ceiling, a gift from Antonio, who visited weekly to cook meals and dote on the baby he'd decided was his honorary grandchild. "What do you think, little one?" Emma whispered. "Should we let Richard deeper into our world?" Lily's response was a contented sigh as she drifted off to sleep. Emma continued rocking, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago she'd been pregnant and terrified, cleaning houses and hiding her voice. Now she was a successful artist, a devoted mother, and possibly on the verge of a love she'd never imagined possible. Her phone buzzed with a message from Carolyn Astor. "Saw the photos of you and Richard at the benefit. You look happy. Real happiness, not the performed kind. Cherish it." Emma smiled. Caroline had become an unexpected ally, using her platform to champion Emma's music and the causes she supported. The world that had once seemed so closed off, so hostile to someone like Emma, had cracked open to reveal unexpected kindnesses. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Jake had filed legal papers seeking partial custody of Lily. Emma stared at the documents delivered by a process server who looked apologetic, her hands shaking with rage and fear. Richard arrived within minutes of her call, followed by his legal team. The living room transformed into a war room, lawyers spreading documents across the coffee table Emma had bought secondhand and lovingly refinished. "He has no case," the lead attorney assured her. "No support, paid no contact for months, no relationship established. This is a nuisance suit, probably hoping you'll pay him to go away." "I won't pay him a cent," Emma said fiercely. "He doesn't get to profit from abandoning us." "Good. We'll file a response immediately. Request full custody with no visitation until he can prove consistent support and genuine interest." But the legal battle, even one she was likely to win, took its toll. Emma found herself checking locks, obsessively watching for Jake at every performance, wondering if he might try to approach Lily. The stress affected her music. She couldn't write, couldn't find the emotional space for creativity while protecting her daughter from the man who'd abandoned them both. Richard stepped up in ways that proved his earlier words. He coordinated with the legal team, hired additional security for the cottage, and made sure Emma could focus on Lily without worrying about the rest. He didn't try to be a hero or take over. He simply made himself useful, present, necessary. It was Grace who pulled Emma out of her spiral. "You're letting him win," she said during a studio session where Emma had failed to record a single usable take. "Jake doesn't have to be in your life to control it, if you let fear of him change how you live. But what if he actually gets some form of custody? What if I have to hand my baby over to him? Then you deal with that if it happens. But you can't live in the what-ifs. You have a daughter who needs her mother present, not paralyzed by fear. You have music to create a life to live." Grace took Emma's hands. "You survived being abandoned while pregnant. You survived poverty and humiliation. You survived premature labor and those terrifying weeks in the NICU. You'll survive this too." That night, Emma wrote 3 songs in a fury of creativity. They weren't gentle or pretty, they were fierce, protective, almost primal in their intensity. Songs about mothers defending their young, about women refusing to be diminished by the men who'd failed them, about strength that comes not from absence of fear, but from facing it anyway. David heard the demos and immediately declared them the heart of the new album. "This is it," he said excitedly. "This is the evolution. Not just surviving, but fighting back. Your audience is going to lose their minds." The court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Jake showed up looking like he'd dressed for a music video, artfully distressed jeans, vintage band t-shirt, the same studied casualness that had once charmed Emma, but now just looked like costume. Emma wore a simple but elegant dress, Lily on her hip, in a matching outfit. Richard sat behind them in the gallery, his presence a silent support. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, reviewed the case with obvious skepticism. "Mr. Matthews," she said, peering over her glasses, "you're seeking joint custody of a child you've never met, never supported, and only acknowledged after her mother became famous. Can you explain your sudden interest in fatherhood?" Jake launched into a prepared speech about making mistakes, about being young and scared, about wanting to make things right. He was persuasive, Emma had to admit. He'd always been good at selling stories. "And have you prepared for a child? Do you have appropriate housing? A nursery? Any understanding of her medical needs as a premature infant?" Jake faltered. I can get those things. I just need a chance to prove myself." "Ms. Wilson," the judge turned to Emma. "What's your position?" Emma stood, Lily balanced on her hip. "Your Honor, I don't want to prevent my daughter from knowing her father if he genuinely wants to be in her life. But showing up after the hard part is over isn't parenting. It's opportunism. If Mr. Matthews wants to prove he's changed, he can start by paying child support, by taking parenting classes, by showing consistent interest that isn't tied to media attention. But I won't hand my vulnerable daughter over to a stranger just because we share DNA." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Matthews, I'm going to deny your request for immediate custody. However, I will allow supervised visitation once a month pending completion of parenting classes and establishment of consistent child support payments. If after 6 months you've shown genuine commitment, we can revisit the custody arrangement." Jake's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. She's poisoning my daughter against me." "Your daughter doesn't know you exist," the judge said coldly. "And whose fault is that court dismissed?" Outside the courthouse, Jake confronted Emma. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. That's my kid too." "Then act like it," Emma said calmly, though her heart was racing. "Pay support. Take the classes. Show up consistently. Prove you're more than just talk." "I don't have money for support. Not everyone got rich and famous. I was working as a maid while pregnant with your child," Emma reminded him. "I didn't have money either, but I found a way. That's what parents do." Jake stormed off, and Emma knew with certainty that he wouldn't follow through. The supervised visits would be too much work, the child support too much commitment. He'd wanted easy access to a successful ex and a cute baby for social media. Real parenthood had never been part of his plan. Richard was waiting by the car, holding Lily, who'd started fussing during the confrontation. "You okay?" "I'm great," Emma said, and meant it. "It's over." He showed his true colors in court, and the judge saw right through him. "You were incredible in there. Calm, reasonable, but fierce." "I was protecting my daughter. Our daughter." The words slipped out before Emma could stop them. Richard went still. "Our..." Emma took a breath, decision crystallizing. "Lily needs a father. A real one. And you've been that for her almost since the beginning. If you're serious about being a family..." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "Then move in with us. Not visiting, not maintaining boundaries. Move in. Be there for the 3 a.m. feedings and the teething and the tantrums. Be her father in every way that matters." Richard's answer was to kiss her right there in the courthouse parking lot, with photographers capturing the moment, and Lily babbling happily between them. The headlines the next day ranged from romantic to skeptical. "From Maid to Millionaire's heart," ran in one tabloid. "Second chance at love," proclaimed another. But Emma had learned to focus on the truth of her life, rather than the stories told about it. Richard moved in that weekend, bringing surprisingly little with him. "Everything I need is already here," he said, looking at Emma and Lily playing on the living room floor. The adjustment wasn't seamless. Richard was used to household staff handling everything. Emma was fiercely independent about her space. He had to learn that Lily's routine was sacred, that nap time was not negotiable, that Emma needed absolute quiet when writing. Emma had to learn to let him help, to share the load she'd been carrying alone for so long. But gradually, they found their rhythm. Richard took the dawn feeding so Emma could sleep after late-night writing sessions. Emma taught him to read Lily's different cries, to understand the difference between hungry, tired, and bored. They developed a routine that accommodated Emma's artistic needs, Lily's baby demands, and Richard's business obligations, which he'd significantly reduced to spend more time with his new family. The second album was coming together beautifully. The songs had an edge the first album lacked, not just survival, but triumph, not just hope, but fulfillment. Grace had brought in musicians who understood Emma's vision, and the cottage's home studio had become a creative haven where art was being born between diaper changes and feeding schedules. One evening, as Emma was putting Lily to bed, she heard music from downstairs. Richard was at the piano playing the melody he'd played months ago, Margaret's song. But this time he was singing his untrained voice, soft but sincere. Emma stood at the top of the stairs, listening. The words were about endings and beginnings, about love that transcends loss, about finding unexpected joy after sorrow. When he finished, she walked down and sat beside him on the bench. "That was beautiful," she said. "I've been thinking about Margaret a lot lately," Richard admitted. "I think she would have loved this family we're building. She always said the best thing come when you're not looking for them. Do you think she would have liked me? She would have adored you. You're everything she valued, authentic, talented, fierce in your love for those you protect." He took her hand. "I think she sent me to that wedding knowing what I'd find there." Emma thought about the chain of events that had brought them together, Vanessa's cruelty, the wedding performance, Lily's early arrival, all of it leading to this moment, this life she couldn't have imagined. "I need to tell you something," Emma said. "I've been thinking about Jake's accusation about poisoning Lily against him. I won't do that, but I also won't lie to her. When she's old enough to ask about her biological father, I'll tell her the truth, that he was young and scared and made choices he might regret. But I'll also tell her about the man who chose to be her father, who was there for her first smile, first word, first steps, the one who reads to her every night and checks on her breathing when she sleeps." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, I want you to adopt her," Emma said, "legally. I want her to be Lily Bennett, to know without question that she has a father who chose her, who fought to be in her life, who loves her not because he has to, but because he can't imagine not loving her." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything except keeping her in the first place." Richard pulled her close, and they sat there on the piano bench holding each other, while upstairs their daughter slept safe and loved, and part of a family that had formed not from tradition, but from choice, from love, from the ashes of what they'd each lost. The next morning brought news that would change everything. David called, his voice electric with excitement. "Are you sitting down? I'm feeding Lily breakfast. Why, you've been nominated for 5 Grammys, 5 Emma, including Album of the Year and Song of the Year for Rise from the Ashes." Emma nearly dropped the spoon full of mashed banana she was aiming at Lily's mouth. That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's happening. The announcement just went live. Your phone is about to explode." He was right. Within minutes, Emma's phone was buzzing non-stop, congratulations, interview requests, messages from other artists. But the message that meant the most came from Grace. "You earned this. Every note, every word. Margaret would be proud." Margaret. Emma realized Grace meant her own lost love, not Richard's. Everyone had their ghosts, their losses that shaped them. Richard came home from a morning meeting to find Emma sitting on the kitchen floor, Lily playing with blocks beside her, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" He immediately crouched beside them. "5 Grammy nominations," Emma whispered. "The girl who failed in Nashville got 5 Grammy nominations." "You didn't fail in Nashville," Richard said firmly. "Nashville failed you. There's a difference." That afternoon, while Lily napped, Emma did a brief press call about the nominations. The questions were predictable. How did it feel? What did it mean? Would she perform? But one reporter asked something that stopped her cold. "Do you think your success is sweeter because of what you went through to achieve it?" Emma thought about the question seriously. "I don't know if it's sweeter, but it's definitely more meaningful. Every woman who's been told she's not enough, who's had to choose between her dreams and survival, who's been invisible in a world that only sees certain types of success, this is for them. These nominations aren't just mine. They belong to everyone who's ever risen from their own ashes." The quote went viral within hours, resonating with millions who saw their own struggles reflected in Emma's journey. As the Grammy ceremony approached 3 months away, Emma faced a decision. This time she could attend in person. Lily was stronger, older, more stable. The world was watching, waiting to see if the Maid who'd sung truth to power could stand on music's biggest stage and claim her place among the industry's elite. "I want to go," Emma told Richard and Grace during a planning meeting. "I want to walk that red carpet with my head high. I want Lily to see it someday, to know that her mother didn't just survive, she thrived." "Then we'll make it happen," Grace said. "We'll do it right this time. No satellite feeds, no compromises. You'll be there and you'll show them all what rising from the ashes really looks like." The preparation began immediately. Designers competed to dress her, knowing the story behind the woman who'd worn a tent-like dress to her breakthrough performance. Emma chose a gown by a young designer who'd also been a single mother, understanding the power of lifting others as you climb. But more importantly, she prepared musically. If she won, and everyone said she had a real chance, she wanted to be ready. She worked on new arrangements, practiced until her voice could handle any emotional moment without breaking. She was no longer the desperate girl singing for survival. She was an artist, preparing to claim her place. The journey to the Grammys became a family affair. Richard arranged everything from the private jet to accommodate Lily's needs to the suite at the hotel with a nursery setup. Antonio insisted on coming too, appointed himself official babysitter for the evening. Even Caroline Astor flew in, declaring she wouldn't miss Emma's triumph for anything. The night before the ceremony, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of their hotel room looking out at Los Angeles lights, thinking about another city of lights, Nashville, that had once held all her dreams. Richard joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Nervous? Terrified," Emma admitted. "What if I don't win anything? What if all this buildup leads to disappointment? Then you'll still be the woman who turned pain into art, who sang truth when everyone expected silence, who built a beautiful life from the ashes of disaster." He turned her to face him. "You've already won everything that matters." Inside, Lily started crying, the sound carrying through the open door. They both smiled, the moment of anxiety broken by the reality of parenthood. "Our daughter needs us," Richard said. "Our daughter," Emma repeated, loving how that sounded. Tomorrow she would face the music industry's biggest night. But tonight she was just a mother comforting her child, supported by a man who'd chosen to love them both. As she rocked Lily back to sleep, humming the melody that would become her next single, Emma realized that Richard was right. She had already won everything that mattered. Tomorrow's ceremony, whatever it brought, would just be the melody. The harmony, this life, this love, this family was already complete.